Good to be here with you guys. Yeah, I'm aliens is probably my favorite topic outside of the gospel because it's not conjectural. You know, you can talk about Bigfoot or you can talk about giants, and there's really nobody that any of us know who are routinely interacting with Bigfoot or giants. So it's not relevant really to everyday life. But when you talk about aliens, as bizarre as it sounds, the abduction program is a constant part, is a continual element of millions and millions of people's lives. It's a continuing phenomenon.
Do you think it's that big? Millions?
Oh, it's very big. Oh, millions, many, many, many millions around the world, hundreds of millions of people.
Are these people emailing you all the time, contacting you?
Yeah, I get contacted from people who are Christians, who are abductees, but they're in denial, and they're trying to find a way to cope with the phenomenon, and they're searching for an understanding that makes them feel safe, that makes them feel like they have a modicum of control over the phenomenon, because of course they don't. And so what these people, who I feel bad for them, because it's never a good thing to live in denial. Denial is not a good tactic. It's not a good coping mechanism. You have to confront the reality of what's happening and then work through the facts and come to grips with the phenomenon as it's actually occurring, not as you want to perceive it or as other people perceive it. And so many of these people are trying to formulate a supernatural explanation for what's happening to them, and accompanying that supernatural explanation, they're trying to convince themselves that they have some control, whether by invoking the name of Jesus or quoting scriptures or something of this nature. And most of the time, these people betray their own attempt, because they often admit that it's not always effective. And so they're trying to figure out, what comes to mind, and I don't mean to be crass, but what comes to mind is it's almost like Hogwarts. It's almost like the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, right? They're trying to figure out which spell will eject the aliens from their bedroom, Expelliarmus or something, and eject these entities out of their bedroom. But instead of a spell, they're searching for some kind of a scripture or some kind of some spiritual principle that they can wield. So this is the kind of email I usually get. Although I do encounter plenty of people who are abductees, some of whom, very, very few of whom, realize that they're abductees. The vast majority are clearly abductees, but are dealing with denial first and foremost, but then also the very potent deceptive mechanisms employed by the Greys, which involve screen memories and other blocking mechanisms. The abductees are not supposed to remember their experiences. So there's actually a biological, perhaps even a chemical response when they attempt to access those memories. They're blocked. There's a blockade there. And they're sometimes offered up screen memories, which are false memories. It's a very difficult situation. If there's any good news for abductees, it's that the aliens never harm. In fact, I've never really encountered a true abduction account in which the aliens actually harm the abductee to the extent that their lives are cut short or are imperiled. Let's say they come back from an abduction experience and find out they have cancer the next day because they've been exposed to radiation or something. This is not in the interest of the aliens. They're using the abductees. They're harvesting genetic material. And so it's like, if we have cattle, if we are cowboys and we're cattlemen and we've got cattle out in our field, it's not in our interest to go out there and harm our cattle and beat them up and cause them bodily harm, because our interest is in harvesting milk or harvesting the meat. Ultimately, we kill our cattle if it's for meat, but thankfully the abduction program is not to harvest us for meat.
Are you familiar with David Paulides' work at all?
No.
So he wrote a book called Missing 411 about people who go
Yes,
missing.
I am, actually. Yes, I am, now that you mentioned the title.
Do you think people don't come back? I mean, do you think there's ever those cases where people are abducted and then we have, something you're going to. I was actually thinking the same thing, that perhaps like maybe the ones that return don't get harmed. Maybe just the people
You're
don't
talking
return.
about the 411 thing is that people who are disappearing in the national parks, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's a very specific. He has a very specific like criteria. There's like zero evidence.
Right.
There's no signs of trauma left.
Yeah.
There's no like people just vanish.
Yeah, and
Like,
I've
they're
heard of
gone.
these stories. I'm not sure that has anything to do with the abduction phenomenon.
Okay.
I suspect, to be honest with you, that if those people are being abducted without a trace, they may very well be being abducted by elements of the military or something like that, some nefarious thing like that, some kind of a human agency, because we have a system of a very massive system of deep underground military bases, DUMBs beneath the earth from a mile to 10 miles, perhaps even deeper at this point in time. I'm going to kind of wade into this a little bit because it does connect back to the topic, the alien topic. I was watching a conference recently. I can't remember the name of the conference. I'm sure some of your listeners were watching this conference as well. It was a rather large conference. I want to say it was, I want to say 3 months ago. Can't remember the name of the conference. A lot of high profile people were speaking at it. It was kind of like the Red Pill conference. It was people speaking against the vaccine, doctors and so forth. It was, I believe General Flynn spoke at the conference. I believe Mike Lindell spoke there, and some of these other figures that have been prominent in the aftermath of everything that happened with the election and so forth. So during this conference, they interviewed Jim Caviezel, and Jim was talking about what he's most passionate about right now is human trafficking, especially the trafficking of children. And he's working with a guy, and I wish I could remember his name because his ministry is exceptional. I mean, it's really not a ministry; it's an operation that's a private operation that saves children. I think most often they rescue kids from Central and South America, and we're talking about kids who are being trafficked for sex in Central and South America. And I wish I could remember this guy's name, but Jim Caviezel played him in the movie, which I can't remember the name of the movie either, that recently came out. Trying to remember the name of that movie. Can't remember.
It wasn't Passion of the Christ, because that was Jesus.
No, it wasn't Passion of the Christ. It's a movie where he plays this guy who goes and rescues these kids. I haven't even seen it yet, but anyway.
Sounds of Freedom?
So Jim Caviezel, yes,
Sound of
something like
Freedom.
that. Maybe that's it. Yes, I think that's it. If Jim Caviezel's the lead actor, then that's it. He, in preparation for this role, he said, and I've listened to him on other interviews where he said this, he has been accompanying these guys on their operations to rescue kids. So he would go in and, with body armor and so forth, and he would go into these locations in Central America and other places, I assume. And he was actually involving himself in the operations in order to learn how to play this role. And so when they were interviewing him at this conference, that's what he was talking about. It was very moving for people who wish I could remember the conference name. I can't remember it. I'm sure you can Google some of these keywords I'm saying. And Jim was on a Zoom call. He wasn't there personally. He was on a Zoom call. And so in the course of talking about this, he mentioned a couple of things. He started to go down the path of talking about, paraphrasing, of course, what he was saying. He was talking about that we would be shocked if we knew the people who were involved in the trafficking of children. That he said they were names we all knew, people, I think he even alluded to people in Hollywood. But, and remember, Jim is not conjecturing here. Jim is actually was actually involved in the operations. So he has working knowledge. He has inside knowledge of the child trafficking. It's happening on an international level, but especially in the United States and Mexico and Central America. So I'm saying all this. I've got a point here. Jim, he started to talk about, and this word always trips me up. I'm sure you guys know the right pronunciation is. Is it adrenochrome?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He started talking about adrenochrome, which is the substance that's produced in the blood. It's very heinous. And Jim is actually saying this. And of course, most of us are familiar with this, have been familiar with this for some years, that they will subject a child to trauma, to extreme trauma, usually fear. sometimes sexual trauma, which involves fear, and then harvest their blood because it's laced with this adrenochrome that the body produces. And so it's alleged that the Luciferian elite are either drinking this or they're injecting it into their own bodies to extend their lives. It has a rejuvenating effect, so the lore goes regarding this. But Jim started to go down that path and talk about this. And then he said, a lot of the children are being trafficked in the dumbs. And I sat there in shock because you don't often hear people talking about children being trafficked in the dumbs. Most people don't know what a dumb is. But here's Jim Caviezel at this conference talking about adrenochrome and that kids are being trafficked in the dumbs. And then he stopped himself. He caught himself. And he realized that he was probably saying things he didn't want to say to that many people. And he backed off really quick and changed the subject. And the conference coordinator or the director of the conference, I believe it was a pastor, kind of wanted to go back and press Jim on the adrenochrome thing, because that audience was familiar with adrenochrome. You're talking about an audience that was very heavily influenced by the Q stuff, and so they were familiar with this. But he never pressed Jim on what I think was even more important than that was this notion that children were being trafficked in the dumbs, which he must have, and I have to believe that Jim must have some kind of information that has come through his involvement with actually rescuing kids that has led him to this conclusion. And the reason why I say this is because I started to talk about the people disappearing into these deep underground military bases, into these dumbs. And it's not hard to imagine a scenario in which we have well over 200 deep underground military bases at this point. Again, 1 mile to 10 miles beneath the surface of the earth. And they use nuclear drills to drill the holes. There's no debris. The heat that's produced by the drills literally melts through the stone, and so there's no debris. You can the audience. I'm sure your audience is probably familiar with a lot of this. They can go and look up the patents that were existent for the things I'm talking about back in the 70s and 80s.
Well, it makes me think of Phil Schneider, his whole story of fighting aliens in the dumbs.
Well, yeah. Because he was a part of a team one of the teams that he was an engineer helping build the dumbs. He would blow out the chambers, and he had to test. He was a geologist. He had to test the kind of rocks that they were dealing with, and then determine the explosives and the power that they needed, and so forth. So
you think that was all legit then?
Absolutely. Phil Schneider's story was 100%. No. Let me back up for a minute. Phil Schneider's story is generally true. I always say that now because it's important to realize that if you're going to be deeply embedded into these operations, then you've probably undergone some kind of mind control. Mind control is a very general and perhaps cheap expression. You've undergone some kind of conditioning, some kind of programming, so that if you ever blow the whistle, you don't have your facts 100% straight. And there's other reasons why they do that as well. But so I think that Phil Schneider was definitely subjected to that to some degree. But the core narration of his story, the major details, I think, are absolutely true.
Yeah, for those listening, he was supposedly in a shootout with aliens underground, and he was the guy. Yeah. He was the guy that built these underground military bases that we're talking about. So
yeah, he was one of the geologists. There was lots of people involved in these things. He was one of the people. One of the geologists working on the project. So the point is, these deep underground military bases are connected by a train system. It's called the Magneto-Leviton train, and it's 100% real. It's now above the earth. Now it's above the above the surface of the earth now. They're building them in China. They're building them all over the place. They want to build them here now, but the Rand Corporation wanted to build them back in the 70s. They said, we have the technology. This would be very beneficial. We can build this right now. And what happened was the project just went underground. They used it. They built maglev trains under the ground, and they drilled these long tunnels connecting the dumbs. And now there's a maglev train that it operates in a vacuum, so there's no air resistance, and it floats off of an electromagnetic wave. I think about 3/4 of an inch off of the rail. It's a monorail, and so there's like no resistance. It's moving through. It's moving in a vacuum. And it's powered by electromagnetism. So these things can go from coast to coast, according to the Rand Corporation back in the 70s, in a half an hour. Wow. So it's the fastest form of transportation outside of the black budget aerospace vehicles that we also have created, like the TR-3B and the TR-34, the TRB, the TR-3B and the TR-4B. So tying this all the way back into what we were talking about with these missing people, perhaps disappearing into underground bases, it's very conceivable that people have disappeared and are disappearing into underground bases and are being used in experimentation and who knows what. They could be cloning. I always say they could be cloning they could have cloned a whole generation of human beings 10 miles beneath the surface of the earth, and nobody would ever know. It's out of sight, out of mind. There's no jurisdiction. Congress doesn't have the need to know. There's literally no jurisdiction. The president has no idea that these things exist. Maybe the president knows that the maglev trains are real and he thinks that they're part of some kind of continuity of government program, and they are, but they don't know about what's going on in these deep underground military bases. Neither do, I doubt that even the Joint Chiefs of Staff know, honestly.
Who's running this whole thing?
The elements of the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. But also the military-industrial complex, together with private contractors. Majestic 12 runs this operation, or did. And I have no reason to believe that they don't still run it.
So you think like portions of our government military are just basically satanic and they're trafficking people? That's why they want the borders open so they can... Because I've read the poor people are the most abducted of all.
Well, you're getting into very convoluted subjects here. I think that the trafficking of human beings it's very profitable. It's as profitable as the trafficking of narcotics at this point. So just on a very surface level, the cartels are heavily involved in human trafficking. So they will abduct people and then traffic them. And of course, they're going to abduct people who aren't going to be missed. Poor people from poor people from poor communities where nobody really where nobody really cares about them. They're not going to go and abduct high-profile people and traffic them. They're going to abduct people who no one's ever heard their name.
Well, they're on the fringe, right? People don't know. They won't notice if they disappear, because they do disappear sometimes. So that's where they're harvesting most of the children. Although many, many American kids go missing too, because the market. It's really even talking about this. I have 5 boys, and it's just enraging. It just makes me want to go get guns and go hunt these people down, because there's nothing more vile. I can't think of anything more vile happening on earth than the trafficking of children. And so it's like a market. They want their clientele, usually very wealthy people. Their clientele. They want certain kinds of kids. They don't just want, brown kids from Central and South America. They want white kids from Scandinavia and America and so in Russia or whatever. And so they'll abduct kids from all over the world based on what their clients want. It's so insidious. And I know this too, Tim. I know that like right now, they say right today, there are more enslaved people on the globe than there have been in the entirety of human history. Like today, there are more, and people don't understand that. Like I work with a couple organizations that work with human trafficking and against human trafficking, and I have some buddies that do the same thing you were talking about with Jim Caviezel that have built teams of ex-SEALs and ex-military guys that go and kick in doors and rescue kids, and they've been deputized by Homeland Security and all this stuff. But I don't think people really understand, because it's such a, I mean, it's as nasty and dark and disgusting as it is, and it's such the underbelly that most people walking around don't even think about it or even understand. It's insane. There's something deeply darkly spiritual about this too, Tim. I mean, right? Because it's like kids it's like it's innocence.
Certainly,
it's the innocent and the pure, right?
I said this is convoluted because I'm going to say something now that's dangerous to say, but I think you guys probably have already assumed this or had knowledge of this, and that is that I believe that elements of the CIA are actually involved in this as well, and in other intelligence organizations around the world. it's convoluted. As I said, it's convoluted. It's more than just the cartels that are doing this, although the cartels are big players. They're big players, but it's not just the cartels. It is so insidious. It is so appalling that if the American people really knew the truth, and the people of the world at large, they just would not be able to absorb it. It's just, there's a level of evil and there's a level of wickedness that is just so abysmal. It's so profound that even if it were to come to light, people just would not be able to process it. They just wouldn't. They would not even. They would put up a block. They would not be able to process it, because it would, if they processed it properly, it would interfere with the happiness of their life. It would invade the everyday mundanity, the comfortable mundanity of their lives would be suddenly invaded by this absolutely horrid reality. And so people, again, going back to this idea of coping mechanisms, people would would automatically engage in coping mechanisms and cognitive dissonance, or whatever the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, they're separating. They have to separate.
I'm sorry, my
themselves
brain
from
hasn't
trauma
woken up yet. I'm extremely exhausted right now.
No, you're good.
I'm drinking coffee, so it'll kick in a little bit here. But going to connect all this, because I know this wasn't the topic of our conversation, but so we have the existence of these deep underground military bases and the insidious things that are happening in them outside of the jurisdiction of any government. Okay, these people operate. They're autonomous at this point. It's what Richard Dolan has coined a breakaway civilization. There is a breakaway civilization. The alien program, in terms of our knowledge of the alien program and our reverse engineering of the technology and our desire to find out what the aliens were doing, and the MILABs, the military abductions, and all of this, everything that falls under the reality of the alien question and our response to it. And when I say our, I mean especially the United States response, elements of the United States government, not just the government, but elements of the corporations and things of this nature too, because this is what Majestic 12 was. Majestic 12 was an organization that was founded, I believe, by Truman. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was founded by Truman, and was tasked with handling all of this, not the trafficking of children. I'm talking about the alien stuff now, and the reverse engineering of the technology and so forth, and trying to figure out what the Greys are up to. Sometimes they're called Majority 12, but Majestic 12. It was supposed to be a council of 12 people, and they were selected from not just government. They were selected from government. They were selected from the private sector as well. So the public and private sector. I absolutely believe that Majestic 12 was real and perhaps is still in operation today, although it may have been dissolved. I don't know. But in my estimation, it was. So when you talk about who's running these things, and again, that's why I said it's convoluted. We have to divide. We have to divide these things into categories. So if we're talking about the alien stuff, then I would say that Majestic 12 is behind a lot of the cover-up and the reverse engineering, and also what's happening, I believe, on Mars already, and has been happening on Mars for decades now, in terms of our...
Tim, can we start at the top, though, with this? Because, what do you think the aliens are? I mean, because that's one of the initial questions. Then we went to they're abducting people.
Yes, we skipped
Why
over
are
the
they
question
doing that?
most people want to know.
Yeah.
Which is... let me say, rather than the question, I think it's probably a declaration or a statement in most people's minds. I guess it's a question. Aren't aliens demons? Aren't these just demons? So how can you be talking about this as if this is more than a demonic phenomenon, than a supernatural phenomenon? The simple answer is that it is more than a demonic phenomenon. It is more than a supernatural phenomenon. It is physical in the most tangible ways. When I say aliens, I mean aliens, absolutely 100% extraterrestrial non-human entities. That's what I mean when I say aliens. And right off the bat here, I will say, actually, I should have said this right off the bat as we began our conversation, because it's important to frame this in the context of my perception. I don't know what you guys think about this, but from my perception, it's important to recognize that I am not talking about demons. I'm not talking about ethereal beings. I'm not talking about fairies and gnomes. gnomes and elves and whatever. I'm talking about extraterrestrial biological entities.
So you're saying off Earth, or you're saying like from another planet? Like
I don't know where they're from, but they're not from the Earth.
Right. I mean, because extraterrestrial just means that like it could be, like it just could be, because I remember we talked before, this is why I'm kind of bringing it up too. You talked about the Greys particularly being biological drones, right? That were, and I think you might have used that language or something along the lines of that.
I don't know what the Greys are. I'm not exactly sure what the Greys are, but they seem to be cloned. And they seem to have drone-like mechanistic tendencies. In other words, there's very little individuality that can be discerned in the gray aliens, the little ones. When we talk about the gray aliens, by the way, we're not just talking about the little bulbous guys. The little guys with the bulbous heads.
Right.
The typical grays that we're all familiar with the almond-shaped eyes, the black almond-shaped eyes. They're not always gray. Sometimes they're putty color, like a peachish putty type color. Sometimes they're very pallid, off-white, but generally speaking, most of them are gray in appearance. The ones that are reported by abductees, and they're only about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. But they're not the ones in charge of the operation. They are, as many people have referred to them as, the worker bees or the worker drones. They do the menial tasks. They retrieve the abductees, and they perform the menial tasks on board their vessels. But there's a hierarchy apparent. Entities that are also seem to be incorporated into this hierarchy, but almost certainly there is. Almost all abductees report the presence of these tall, spindly, very bizarre insect-like entities who David Jacobs, who I think is the preeminent abduction researcher, denominates as insectilins. And they have heads that are kind of shaped like a praying mantis, where it's almost like somebody once described it to me like a parking meter, the shape of a parking meter.
Okay.
So thicker at the top or wider at the top, and it sort of comes to a point at the bottom, and they have huge bulbous black eyes, other than that, they're bipedal, and they have very spindly arms and fingers and so forth. And by the way, this sounds bizarre. This all sounds bizarre. It sounds like we're talking about a movie. It sounds like we're talking about like a movie that we're making or something. But this information that I'm telling you comes from the voluminous and highly academic abduction research data that has been accumulated by extremely qualified, intelligent people over decades. People who were professors at Harvard and Temple University, and people like Carla Turner, who is a PhD in English, and not just some person surfing the internet compiling all of the lore, all of the mythology, the alien mythology.
It sounds like you're making a data-driven argument that people have collected the data. It's not based on speculation. It's not conspiracy theories. It's based on facts and what we can know.
Exactly. So let me try to kick my brain into gear here. I just hit my cord. Can you still hear me? Because this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got you.
Let me try and kick my brain into gear here, because I know that there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of controversy, and people are probably, who are listening to this, their brains are probably firing off 1,000 questions right now, because most Christians assume that aliens are demons or fallen angels. And there's a distinction there that we need to wrestle with right in the beginning here. First of all, aliens are clearly not demons. If you subscribe to the biblical definition of a demon, which is derived in the Bible itself, but also from extra biblical texts like the Book of Enoch, then we're talking about entities that are the disembodied spirits of the progeny of the Watchers from the pre-flood age. That's what the demons are. And this definition of demons is also echoed in the Greek mythology and in the Mesopotamian mythology and in many other mythologies around the world from ancient cultures, all of the major ancient cultures around the world believed in some form of the golden age, the time when the gods inhabited, the time when the gods dwelt on earth among men, co-inhabited with them, and copulated with the daughters of men. In other words, they created offspring.
Genesis 6. Yeah.
And we're all, of course, familiar with this. So the offspring of the Watchers are in the biblical narrative defined as the Nephilim, and other names. They go by other names in the other mythologies. They're sometimes referred to as the golden race. They're sometimes referred to as just giants, or the gods, or the heroes. We're all familiar with this. So we know that, and I say we, I mean me and you guys in your audience, we know that is the origin of demons. I think we're all very, very well versed, especially you guys in your audience. You're very well versed in all of this. So the origin of demons, according to the biblical narrative, of which I subscribe, and I assume you guys subscribe, and most of your audience subscribe, of demons are the disembodied spirits that proceeded from the offspring of the Watchers in the pre-flood age. Hence, these entities, the demons. I'm not talking about living Nephilim. I'm not talking about the offspring of the Nephilim, the genetic offspring of the Nephilim that maybe still exists in the world. I'm talking about the deceased, the spirits of the Nephilim, which proceeded from the bodies of the dead of the dead giants, of the dead Nephilim. The Book of Enoch, for example, confirms this. What I call the historical portion, which is actually referred to as the historical portion of the Book of Enoch, before the parables of Enoch, which are highly esoteric. The book of what's called the Book of the Watchers, the first handful of chapters of the Book of Enoch. It's actually called the Book of the Watchers, and it's written in a historical fashion, like parts of the Book of Genesis. So, and it corresponds directly with the Book of Genesis, as you guys know. It's perhaps coincidental that Enoch 6 corresponds directly with Genesis 6, and the first couple of paragraphs are identical. Because the writer of Genesis basically copy and pasted from the Book of Enoch in the beginning of that chapter. So there is this, I'm going to call it mythology, but of course I believe it to be true, or to be rooted in truth. But there's the Hebrew mythology that the spirits that proceeded from the dead Nephilim, the dead giants, were cursed, that God cursed them, that they would have to wander the earth bodiless. They would be bodiless wraiths, that they would have all of the desires of the flesh, but without the ability to satisfy them because they have no flesh. And so the only thing that they could do in order to satiate these carnal desires would be to inhabit, to possess the bodies of other living things, especially human beings, because they were part human. And by the way, their fathers, I believe, looked just like us, very much like us. They're not human, but we look like them, basically.
No, you call them the elder race, right?
I call them the elder race. Yes. So it would be very natural for these disembodied spirits to want to inhabit human bodies. It would be the most natural condition. Of course, they can inhabit swine, apparently, according to the scriptures, the New Testament. Jesus casts the legion of demons into swine.
Well, we've had people on our show say they get into Bigfoot and Dogman and all these other cryptid,
who knows? I don't know, but I can say this. What I can say with certainty is that they have one desire and only one desire, one all-consuming desire, and that is to fulfill the lusts of the flesh by possessing bodies, carnal bodies. And specifically human bodies. Can they possess other bodies? Apparently so. And I talk about this in my book, by the way. I have a theory of how they do that. But we won't go into that now. So those are demons, right? I think we can all agree that those are demons. These are the very same demons that Jesus encounters in the New Testament. Of course, they were cursed. This was part of a judgment on the offspring of the Watchers, that they would have to wander the earth bodiless, that they would suffer hunger and thirst, but not be able to satisfy the desires of the flesh, which they no longer have. So they have the desires, but they don't have the flesh. Okay, so Jesus encountered. Oh, and by the way, and also that this would happen until the day of judgment, when the great judge comes to judge the earth, was part of the judgment in the book of Enoch. And so it's no coincidence that we find the demons absolutely freaking out when they see Jesus of Nazareth walking in the flesh on earth. because he's the judge.
Yeah.
And so they're freaking out. And what do they say to him in a couple of instances, different instances in the New Testament? They say, "We know who you are. You are the Son of God. Why have you come to torment us before the time?" Before the appointed time. Before the appointed time. Before the appointed time. Before the appointed time. Through all of that so that we can have the demons properly categorized. Those are demons. So let's put them aside. Let's put them in their category, where they go. Now let's return to the aliens. Okay? Actually, let's not return to the aliens yet. Let's define one more group category before we return to the aliens. The other category that we're all familiar with is this term, are these entities who we call, quote unquote, fallen angels. And I say quote unquote because that term fallen angels is contrived. It doesn't exist. We've contrived it. We have inferred this condition, which is correct. It's a correct inference that these beings are fallen in the sense that they are apostate. Now, there's a term that is biblical. The term fallen angel is not biblical. The term apostate, in the sense that a being is insurrectionary. There's a term that we're all familiar with, thanks to January 6th, in the sense that they are now enemies of God, that they are rebels against God. That's what apostate means.
Yeah, because a third of heaven rebelled, right? I mean, so there's this whole. Yes. I believe that if we can deduce that a third of the angelic host rebelled, but there's other people who have different ideas about that. But that's the position that I hold. So these quote-unquote fallen angels, which are better defined as apostate sons of God. That's a much better definition, because fallen angel is a contrivance. They are apostate sons of God. That's what they are, because the word angel is nondescript. It doesn't have any explanatory power.
Well, that's what it says in Genesis. It calls them the sons of God, so it would make sense. Yeah.
When angels are just messengers, right? That's
exactly.
That was the term, is a messenger.
Just a messenger. Yeah. It doesn't have any explanatory power. It does not explain. It does not give us any insight into the nature of the being that it denotes. It just tells us about their temporary occupation. They're a messenger. They're functioning in the capacity of a messenger or an envoy. That's it. Period.
In my mind, I might have one of those elementary school charts where they have it all the entities, and we need a chart like that, right? You need to.
Well,
somebody
maybe so. Because there's a lot of confusion, and so
totally.
So I don't like the term fallen angel, although I use it because everybody knows what I mean. But I don't like it. I find it to be a little bit cartoonish. But if you say apostate son of God, that's much more explanatory. That really gives you a sense of who you're dealing with here. These are sons of God. Adam was a son of God. Remember. That's a different story. Adam was a son of God. So these are beings that are very much like us. We can relate to these beings. I don't believe that these beings have the power. I do not believe, and many people are going to disagree with me here, but I do not believe that these beings have the power to metamorphosize into inanimate objects or other things. There's no indication that they can do that anywhere in either the biblical or extra-biblical text. That is a complete fairy tale that has come out of the Middle Ages, that has come out of the medieval theology. That and of course that's where the conflation between angels and demons comes. Fallen angels and demons comes from too. It's medieval. So this idea that fallen angels can take on the shape of an animal or shapeshift or metamorphosize into some, or even into like a flying saucer, into an inanimate object. People need to understand that it's okay if you believe that. That's fine, but it's not supported in any text anywhere that is, biblical or extra biblical. It's just not supported. The idea that they can metamorphosize. So you're dealing with, and the reason why I say that is that I want people to understand we're dealing with entities that are very much like us. We can understand these beings. Adam was also a son of God. Adam was very much like them. That's why I call them our elder siblings, the elder race, because they are our elder siblings. And Adam was the younger sibling. They're not human. Let me make that distinction. They are not human. They're not made from the substance of the earth. They're not us, but we are related to them. So in that Adam and the angels were a part of the same family. They were a part of the Father's house. I just did a video on this, by the way. People want to.
Tim, real quick, because I know this is just a little off topic, but do you think the rebellion had to do with the fact that, like your book talks about how we were given dominion here, and part of heaven, or all of heaven as far as the angelic race, was in a sense kind of in servitude to the human race? And do you think that spawned some of what happened with the rebellion? Is that there was some jealousy, almost like Joseph and the covenant? You have this younger brother, and the older brother gets jealous, and there's this sort of backlash. I mean, I actually was just thinking about this the other day.
I'm certainly familiar with that. With that,
I don't know where there's I don't remember where I saw that or what I was doing, but it was like, it was an interesting thought that, like, the highest in heaven were like, wait a minute, like we're supposed to, they have dominion over us in this space, like we're servitude to this, and we sit, in the council of the Most High, and this and that. And
I tend to think that, and I make the case for this in my book, that the rebellion happened first, and in fact, part of the reason why Adam was created was because of the rebellion. He was created in the aftermath.
Yeah, we talked about that on our first episode. There was like a war on Mars, and then
I think so. So. Now, can I prove that is the case? No, but I do make a case in my book. I offer a perspective, and I think I mentioned back in the first show we did that it was David Flynn. I have to give the late David Flynn, credit that he really got me thinking along these lines, and that just kind of opened up a whole new panorama of biblical history, let's call it.
Well, I think the chronological sequence of that actually does make more sense in a lot of ways than it being reactive to the creation of Adam.
You're correct in thinking that that the appointment of Adam as the governor of Earth, the vice regent of planet Earth, that's exactly what he was created to be. He was created to be a vice regent of the Earth. That certainly would have, and I say this in my book, and I explain, and I go into some more detail about it, that certainly would have created some jealousy, for sure, among his elder siblings.
And you see that in the prodigal son story. The older brother is jealous.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well, yes, there's some spite there, and there's jealousy in the story of Joseph, as you mentioned correctly. And I do believe that there are allusions there to those realities. So,
yeah, we got you off topic a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah. So we're saying that, so not fallen angels. You're on that point. Like these fallen angels are apostate sons of God.
Yes. And so I want us to define these three categories here. So we're defining what angels are right now. And we're just going to do a very brief definition here, because there's a lot to be said here. Again, and I say it in the book, but for the sake of brevity, I don't believe that angels can metamorphosize. That's an important point, because that eliminates the possibility that angels are, that when you see a flying saucer, when you see an orb, or when you see a saucer, that it is a fallen angel. That's nonsense. That's nonsensical. Angels use technology. They don't transform into technology. They use it. And by the way, I think we can assume that they build it also, but that's another conversation. So, and again, we're using the term angel, messenger. So we're talking about this elder race of entities that pre-exist mankind, who, when they're delivering messages to mankind, are called ambiguously designated as angels in the biblical narrative. Okay, but are otherwise an advanced race that hails from a very ancient civilization. And among these beings, there are apostates. And we're all familiar with those apostates. Again, we tend to call them fallen angels, but really all that would mean is fallen messengers, which really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's why to think of them as apostate sons, it's much more clarifying. So you have among this elder race, these sons of God. And by the way, let me interject here. Not all of the beings, the sentient beings in the cosmos, are sons of God. This is a familial designation of which Adam was a member. Adam was a son of God. Not all of these other entities are sons of God. Some of them are servants in the kingdom. Some of them are also apostate, but they're not sons of God. So you have apostate sons of God. And then you have other sentient things that are also apostate, that are in a condition of enmity with God, which, by the way, is the condition that we come out of the womb. That's the human condition. We are born at enmity with God. That's what we're told by the apostles in the New Testament, that we are in our natural state at enmity with God, and that through the cross, Christ brings peace and reconciliation. Okay, so we are apostate when we're born. When we come pop out of our mother's womb and we're roiling around in our natal blood, we are apostate. We are apostate human beings who are at enmity with God, who need to be reconciled to God. That's part of the gospel. Okay, so these are not foreign concepts to us. These are very intimate, and these are very intimate concepts to the human race. We're part of this story. We're not talking about beings that are so divorced from us, that are so different from us that we cannot comprehend them. We're talking about beings that are very, very much like us. We are very, very much like them. So the sons of God, not necessarily the other ones, but the sons of God.
Well, we interviewed a guy that says they're already here, that they're already walking among us.
They're working with our
Well,
government.
you're getting further down the path here. You're talking about
Yeah.
So I'll wrap
Okay.
this up right now so that we can move on to get further along down the path here. So that's what angels are. So when we talk about fallen angels, we're talking about apostate sons of God. We're talking about an ancient race of beings who I designate the elder race simply because it's the easiest designation for me. It makes the most sense. It seems very logical and intuitive to call them the elder race. They're older than us, and they do constitute a race, and they do come from a civilization. And so those are, quote unquote, fallen angels. Okay. So we have demons defined and we have fallen angels defined. Now we have to deal with aliens. Now we have to deal with gray aliens and the insectolins and so forth. For those people who don't believe that the gray aliens and the insectolins actually exist, that's a whole deep dive. That's a big study. And if you do it correctly, you will come out the other end absolutely convinced that they do, because the information, the data is conclusive. It's conclusive. And most of that data pertains to the abduction phenomenon. It is absolutely scientifically conclusive that these things do exist. They are physical. The phenomenon is physical. And I'll get back to that point in a minute. So what are aliens? Well, let's talk about the term extraterrestrial very quickly. The term extraterrestrial, as you rightly mentioned earlier, simply means not from the earth. Extraterrestrial. So not from the earth. They come from somewhere other than planet Earth. That's what extraterrestrial means, period. So we can now define the demons that we categorized as terrestrial. They were born here, correct? They were born here. They are therefore terrestrial. In fact, one of the definitions of Nephilim is earthborn. Is one of the potential definitions of the word Nephilim, which isn't a Hebrew word, which is an Aramaic word, which was transliterated into Hebrew. So earthborn. So the Nephilim are earthborn. They're not extraterrestrial. They're like us. We're earthborn. They're hybrids, of course, but they're like us. They're earthborn. Now, what about the quote unquote fallen angels? What about the elder race? Are they earthborn? No, we know that they're not earthborn, and we don't have to go into all that now. I think most people understand that. They're not earthborn. They're not from here. We're from here. We were created from the clay of the earth, from the soil of this planet. They weren't. They have a different nature than us. Okay, they are therefore extraterrestrial, period. That's it. They're extraterrestrial, whether people like it or not. I mean, they are. They're extraterrestrial. Right. Now, you can say they're extra-dimensional, blah, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't matter. It makes no difference if you say extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial. The point is that they're not from the earth. Therefore, they are, by definition, extraterrestrial. Extra-dimensional is still extraterrestrial. So they are extraterrestrial. Let's just establish that right now. Okay. So if we return now to these, and they're also alien, by the way, because they're not human. That's the very simple definition of the word alien. It's not us. It's not human. Non-human entities. Let's make it sentient entities to be more concise. Non-human sentient entities, that's what an alien is. So the apostate sons of God and the sons of God in general are both extraterrestrial and non-human aliens in relationship to the human race.
Sounds crazy to say that because there's a lot of baggage with Alien, right? But it does.
But it's
factually correct. But yeah, I mean, there's the cultural baggage that comes along with that. People just don't talk in those terms. It's funny.
Point,
but it's factual. Yeah,
I'm not concerned with cultural baggage. I'm just concerned with the facts. And I know you guys are too. And I know that's not an accusation on your part.
No, I'm just saying, just the way it comes off. You're like, oh yeah, they're aliens. And it's like that's such a loaded word based on what we've been programmed to. Yeah.
Well, it's anathema. It's anathema among Christians. The word alien is anathema. It's taboo, but it doesn't make any sense. It's really an inconsequential controversy. It means nothing. It's meaningless. It's a controversy over the meaning of words. And as I've just demonstrated, those words perfectly fit the categories that we're using right now in terms of the sons of God. And they also perfectly fit the gray aliens. The gray aliens. Now, is it possible that the gray aliens are in fact from the earth or the inner earth, as some people have speculated? I guess that's possible, yes. But there's reasons why I don't believe that is the case. And I make the case for why I don't believe that is the case in the book. And I think there's very clear reasons why the grays, specifically the grays. Now, I don't know about the reptilians and these other things, but the grays are not from the earth in my estimation. And I think a lot of ufologists would agree with me because there's some very glaring things that indicate that they're not from the earth. So let's just assume that they're not. That would also make them extraterrestrial. No matter what, they're alien. They're not us. They're non-human sentient entities. They are therefore aliens, whether they're from the earth or not. Because by the way, you can still be an alien and be from the earth. But these are, in my estimation, non-human alien extraterrestrials. In other words, they're not us, they're not human, they're biological entities that come from somewhere other than planet Earth. Okay. Now, I know that was maybe very boring and tedious for some of the people listening, but it's important because a lot of the argumentation that happens in the Christian circles revolves around the terminology, revolves around people's understanding of these terms and their perceptions of these things. So if you categorize things like I just did, it just sort of dissipates the controversy. Where's the controversy here? There is no controversy. The only thing that people are going to try and say is, well, these things are extra-dimensional and not extraterrestrial, but you have not changed the terms. You've changed the syllables without changing the terms. And so extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, it doesn't matter. We're talking about the same concepts here. So the difference would be that I might believe that the grays, let's say, come from the interior of Mars, for example. I'm not sure I believe that, but I think it's a possibility. Okay, let's say they come from the interior of Mars. All right, well, you may believe that the grays come from a different dimension. The difference is, unless you subscribe to the flat earth theory, which I do not, the difference is that I've never seen another dimension. I can't even conceive of another dimension. I don't even know what that means. I mean, I know what it means. I know what the abstract conceptualization of an extra dimension is, but or the pop cultural conceptualization of an extra dimension is, but we don't really know what that is. We cannot perceive more than the three dimensions of space and the one of time that we actually inhabit. So when we talk about extra dimensions, we really have no frickin' idea what we're talking about. We don't. This is a very nebulous and abstract thing, an extra dimension. Now, I am not saying that an extra dimension does not exist. In fact, I subscribe to the idea, to the notion that we live in a hyper-dimensional universe, a universe that is indeed comprised of more than the three dimensions of space and the one of time that we inhabit. So I actually subscribe to that. But people conflate extra dimensional with alternative universes and with hyperspace, notions of hyperspace, and a handful of other things.
Tim, I got to ask. Okay, so we define these. We can't say where they're from. I mean, that just, we don't know, right? If God's the only creator, did God created these things? And so they're in...
God either created them or he created the things that made them. Okay, so did God create the grays? I don't know. But I suspect that the grays, the little guys, the bulbous head grays, are manufactured. They're manufactured. They're the result of genetic engineering. They were manufactured to do exactly what they do.
They're described like that, right? They're kind of lifeless. They're kind of emotionless when you read about people's encounters. They're almost like flesh robots, the way that people... Yeah.
They are. They're very dispassionate. They don't express emotion. They're very drone-like. And so that's why so many people have conjectured that they are, in fact, biological drones or clones or biological cloned drones or something of this nature. It's basically, they're mechanistic and biological at the same time. They're like almost like cyborg type entities. That's what people have conjectured. And
you don't think there's like another planet, like this was a whole other thing God did on another planet, and then like Jesus had to die there? No.
There is no reason. Well, okay, let's back up for a minute because
I mean, you get that thing, right? You talk about, okay, if there's other worlds, then that Jesus has to go die for the white aliens and the green aliens.
This is an understandable contention. In fact, the Vatican.
They just made a statement about some of this stuff. Yeah,
the Vatican scholars are wrestling with this right now. They're formulating a theology that to accommodate aliens and their theology. It's a Christology. It's a theology in which that incorporates a salvific path for aliens through Christ. Okay, well, what do I say to that? I say it's irrelevant. That's the best way for me to say it. It's absolutely irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Why? Because Christ did not die for the angels. We know that. The Bible clearly tells us that Christ did not die for the angels. And we've already established that angels are extraterrestrial aliens based on the definitions of those words. So if Christ didn't die for those extraterrestrials, why should we expect him or require him to die for other extraterrestrials? That's why it's irrelevant.
Yeah,
it's completely irrelevant, because if you're going to get hung up on this idea of the salvific implications of Christ's work on the cross for aliens, then you need to start with angels. Why are you skipping over angels with your contentions? People need to.
That's a great point, Tim. I mean, it really is, because that's people. I think take the humanist look, right, and they say, well, they're like us, or they're not really like us, but they have their own planet like us, and so. If you go from that worldview and you say, well, then they need to be saved as well, you are skipping the idea that we have all this history, we have this knowledge, we have the Bible and Enoch, and we have all these things to talk about the angelic race and what happened in the spiritual realm, however you want to quantify that, and yet we know that Jesus came for humanity. So
he didn't die for the angels. Now, is there a path of salvation for angels or whatever? I don't know. I mean, the writers of the New Testament never talked about anything like that. Christ never talked about anything like that. So it's just a big question mark. And again, I'm going to use this word again. It's irrelevant to me. I'm a human being. What's relevant to me is the gospel of Christ as it pertains to the human race. And it only pertains to the human race in terms of its salvific power, and the resurrection and so forth. And that's it. I mean, that's the gospel of Christ. We know that it pertains to the human race and not to the angels in its salvific power. Now, there are other ramifications that affect the angels, but we're specifically talking about the salvific dynamic of the gospel of Christ, which again pertains to us, to the human race. Okay, so if it only pertains to us and not to them, and they are very much like us, but they're extraterrestrial and they are pre-existent. They're also preeminent, by the way. They're pre-existent. And they predate us. They were here. They were in the universe before us, and they're very much like us. We're very much like them. They are extraterrestrial and alien by definition, and yet nobody has any qualms about Christ not dying for them. So what's the difference? You tell me. What's the difference? There is no difference. If we're going to start getting upset about that, then we need to start. Then we need to start with the angels, and we can't, because we know definitively that Christ did not die for the angels.
So I guess maybe when people think of alien, are they thinking the Greys? Is that like the universal understanding of what an alien is? Like ancient alien people think that, or do they have a?
No, not necessarily. Actually,
okay,
not necessarily. I'm actually, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yes, the gray alien with the bulbous head with the almond-shaped eyes, the black almond-shaped eyes. That's the most ubiquitous representation of the aliens in pop culture. However, when you think about when you listen to these ancient alien guys talk about the ancient astronaut theory and the Von Donigan and Giorgio Tsoukalos and the rest of these guys, really they're really not talking about the Greys. I mean, some of them maybe some of the talking heads on that show, some of the personalities are thinking of the grays, but the main guys are not thinking about the grays. The main personalities are thinking about who we would define as the Nordics.
Or the Watchers, right? Isn't it the
same?
Well,
yeah, the elder race. Let's say, just for the sake of clarity here, they're thinking about the elder race. They're thinking about the Nordics, the quote unquote Nordics, the Pleiadians. They're thinking about the Anunnaki. So they're not necessarily thinking about the grays when they're thinking alien. They're thinking about the beings that look like us. In fact, I'm not a proponent of ancient astronaut theory. I actually think it's pretty absurd to some degree. However, the premise of the theory is not absurd. The premise of the theory states that mankind has been in contact for untold ages with extraterrestrial entities. Well, that's true. I mean, that's the biblical narrative. So the premise of ancient astronaut theory is actually true, but of course then they go off the rails on all kind of absurdities and completely divorce themselves from anything even approximating the biblical narrative. So I can't be in agreement with them. So, but again, the premise of their theory is actually correct. It's biblically accurate to say that mankind has been in contact with extraterrestrials from the very beginning. So. But we now know what we're talking about when we say extraterrestrials. We're talking about the elder race, who we are accustomed to calling angels or the sons of God.
So just to get this straight, we have spiritual vagabonds, which is the demons. We have these biological drones, which is the grays, and then we have the sons of God, which are
very much like us. They are basically our elder siblings.
So far we have three.
And by the way,
three different classes here.
And let me interject here and say that I have contrived some of my own. I've coined some of my own terms here, for the sake of my own clarity as I think about these things. It was helpful for me to do this, and so I incorporated it into my book. I refer to the angels as the elder race, and I also call them our elder siblings. And some people get very disturbed by both of those terms because they're foreign. Understandably so. I can sympathize.
Yeah, and our listeners should know because we went into detail about that. With the prodigal son, we went heavy into that.
Yes, and so I want to point those listeners who might be disturbed by those terms to the series of videos that I'm doing on my YouTube channel, the lecture series on my book. I've been doing a lecture series. I've completed 3. In fact, the last one was on the prodigal son. So go back and watch those, and I think that you will become more comfortable with these definitions, with these monikers. If you go back and listen to how I derive these monikers based on the biblical text, based on the biblical narrative. So I just wanted to interject that for people who are having a hard time. Maybe pause this and go back and take a look at those, and then come back and so you're not hung up on those terms. These are just ways for me, because the word angel is so nondescript, because it does not have any explanatory power. But when we say elder race, that's much more. It's much more definitive. So is the notion that they are our elder siblings. And so when you think about them as our elder siblings, which they are according to the scriptures, and that becomes very clear if you go and watch.
Well, I've been thinking
videos
about this a lot, Tim, because like on the last couple episodes we've been doing, because the idea of angels, I think we have sort of a Hollywood. We've been programmed by Hollywood to think of what angels is, but apparently in the Bible, they ate food. They had manna from heaven. Right? So they were
the bread of the angels.
Yeah, the bread of the angels, and they mated with humans.
They sang and they played music, and they have a written and spoken language, and they wield technology.
Are they in a physical location, you think?
Yes. Well, here's the thing, okay? I don't believe that there is a different. I believe that what we call the spiritual is not what we conceive of as the spiritual. I think that obviously there is a spiritual reality, but I don't think it's the way we think of it in Western terms. And you said a Hollywood perspective. Really, I would define it as a medieval perspective, and that is not to denigrate people. I have a medieval perspective in many ways still, and I certainly did, and I've had to work through that. I sometimes refer to that as a Sunday school perspective, and this medieval perspective, it comes from the roots of the Western Christian Church, which is rooted in the Catholic Church, and then through the Reformation, through Martin Luther and the Reformation. And so we have to realize that there was a lot of medieval perceptions that came through and that we have inherited, especially in the way we think about angels and demons. Like the notion, for example, that demons are tricksters, right? I think a lot of people assume demons are tricksters. Well, that's medieval. That you're not really going to find that attribute as it relates to demons when you go way back into the ancient world and you start to understand the way they thought of demons and these entities. So a lot of our perceptions come through medieval theology and just medieval thinking and the zeitgeist of thinking in the Middle Ages. Much of which, by the way, was contrived through the Catholic Church. They had a whole demonology that and an angelology, by the way, which we're all very familiar with. They have an angelology, which is absurd. The little, I call them the little pedophilic cherubim, the little chubby cherubim, basically, 1.5-year-olds flying around with wings, That's what I mean when I say medieval. Where did that come from? It's completely invented. It's imagined. It's fanciful. Okay, so we have a lot of that's seeped through Western Christianity and has really no roots in the ancient Hebrew perspective or even the New Testament perspective. The writers of the New Testament didn't think of angels as little chubby babies flying around with wings. And in fact, angels having wings is a misconception altogether. They don't. And I know people are going to make some argumentation regarding some of the prophetic iconography, but that is exactly that, prophetic iconography, which is communicating a message. It's the symbols communicate the message. It's not that what you see is literal. It's you have to unpack what you see. The message is contained in the symbol, in the symbols. And so let's not get hung up on the notion that angels have wings and fly around through the sky with their wings and can metamorphosize.
But they can build craft and they build these UFOs and they eat food and they mate with us. So I guess in the last couple of episodes, my mind's been really catching up to what you said on our first episode with you, that they are our elder siblings. They are interacting in the physical space that we...
Yeah. They are the members, the citizens of a civilization.
It's wild.
And civilization that by the way, our civilization comes from theirs. And people get all hung up on that. And so God, our civilization comes from God. Well, that's what I mean. They're the sons of God. Well, who's their father? I mean, there's when I say their civilization, when I'm talking about their root civilization, I'm talking about the kingdom of heaven. I'm not talking about like some civilization on the planet Venus.
Hey Tim, I had a question. So we categorize everything. What we consider the alien portion of that. Are they part of the dark side? Are they part of the bad stuff?
Who are we talking about?
Is it the aliens? So we go. There's us, and then there's the elder race, the angelic, and there's the grays and
the grays?
Extraterrestrial. Yeah, the grays, the insects, the reptiles.
Yeah, the insectulins.
They're bad, right? They're the bad. They're still the bad stuff.
All right. Time to consult the book.
Because the only reason is because Tim. Because a couple things is like there's this narrative, and we heard it on the show about how this stuff is benevolent, and they're working with our government, and they planted us here, and they're going to save us from all these socio problems.
Yes,
that's a real narrative.
That is
people
the narrative.
Are pushing.
Oh, that is the narrative. In my estimation, that is exactly what's going to happen. In fact, I believe that the beast is one of them.
So do I. So we're on the same page there.
And so it's not just the beast, by the way. It's the beast and his kings.
Apollo, right?
It's the Apollo and the golden race. And when the golden race appears, by the way, I believe that the golden race is going to save us. Yes, save us from what is the question? Well, some people have conjectured that they're going to save us from some kind of a natural disaster, some kind of a global warming disaster, or like a pole shift, or just absolute chaos on the earth, or World War III. Okay, that's all very possible, sure, but that's assuming that the gray alien, the abduction program, isn't going to come to fruition, and they're not factoring the abduction. They're not factoring in the menace of the gray aliens.
So it talks about that. What are they doing?
It's coming out now in the news. We're watching this unfold.
Right now. So this is totally relevant, right? And what are they doing with the abduction?
Well, let's talk about what the apostate sons of God are going to save us from. They're going to save us from the grace.
Interesting.
And this narrative, I gotta be honest. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that. I wrote it in my book, and I've been thinking about this for many years. And I've never heard anybody say. Maybe people have said that, I don't know. But as far as I'm aware, I've never personally heard anybody postulate that the quote unquote fallen angels are going to save us from the grace. But that is the most likely scenario. If you just watch the news, what we're seeing is the unfolding of this very strange, awkward disclosure. But what is the disclosure? Everybody's talking about disclosure, but I want to know, this is the relevant question. What is the disclosure? Well, the disclosure is being very well defined right now. The disclosure is this: there is a hostile alien faction invading our airspace. We call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Okay, these entities are manufacturing physical hardware technology that far exceeds our own, and these are corporeal beings that are piloting these advanced aerospace vehicles, these UFOs. This is all leaking right now. These UFOs, these off-world vehicles, as they're being called now in the news, are taking aggressive and hostile, I want to say hostile actions, but they're not attacking us, okay?
It's taking strategic.
They're harassing us.
Positions.
They're harassing us. There's a better word for it, but just.
So Tim, that's what I want to go back to though. Are they do you think they're working with the sons of God, the apostate sons of God?
This is the question.
And they're going to divide? Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is the question, and the answer is I don't know. But I lay out three possible contingencies as it pertains to the Greys and their relationship with the dragon and his angels, the devil and his angels, who ultimately is controlling the narrative, is controlling the trajectory of where things are going, which is going to culminate in the rise of the beast and ultimately with Armageddon. By the way, Armageddon, I think we talked about this in the first episode, is not just a war with Israel, it's a war with God. So that's where this is going, and everything is being funneled in that direction. So ultimately, yes, the disclosure and the Greys and the technology that they're using and the UFOs and everything is going to play a part in all of that. Yes. Now, what is the nature of the involvement of the apostate sons of God with the Greys? That's the question. I don't know. Are they, I'm flipping around in my book here because I have all of this much better articulated than I can do tonight. I'm not performing very well for you guys tonight, but there's three contingencies that I lay out in the book, and you can, I can't remember exactly the way I worded them in the book right now. When I got the book in front of me, I just can't find exactly where this part of the book is.
Well, if you had to say, what is your best guess? Because obviously nobody knows.
Okay, I just found it.
Right.
So this is what I say, because this is the best way to answer this question. There's three alternatives, okay? There may be more, but these are the three that come to mind. And you'll understand why these three come to mind if you read the book, because I work up to this. This isn't just, I just don't, I don't just start talking about these alternatives without laying the groundwork. I lay the groundwork for them first. Alternative A, the Greys are controlled. Now, by the way, I'm going to use a term here called dragon princes, because I believe there are 7 dragon princes, not just one. There are 7 dragon princes. And they are, the chief among them is this nefarious entity that we call Satan. Of course, he's called Ha-Satan, and it's not always necessarily that specific being. It's kind of like a personality that different entities have. That's a long discussion. But there is a singular personage that is highlighted in the scriptures, who we call Satan or Lucifer. Lucifer is a misnomer, by the way, but who we call.
Well, that was invented by the Italians. Yeah,
it's for lack of a better term, we call it Lucifer, Satan. So he's the chief of this confederacy. It's and I go through that in the beginning of the book. So when I say dragon princes, know that I'm talking about the dragon and his princes. Okay. Alternative A, the Greys are controlled by the Dragon Princes. The breeding program is directly orchestrated by agents of the insurgency. The Insectolins are under their command. Alternative B, the Greys are allied with the Dragon Princes. The breeding program is managed by the Insectolins as part of a larger strategy mutually beneficial to both parties. The Greys may be one of several alien factions who have joined the insurgency in preparation for the coming war, and that coming war is Armageddon, okay? Alternative C, the Greys are autonomous. The breeding program has been initiated solely by the Insectolins for their own objectives. The Dragon Princes will take advantage of the alien threat to deceive humanity. To deceive humanity. To deceive humanity. To deceive humanity.
See, Tim, the last one's hard for me. It almost wants to break my brain. Like that. Gosh, I mean, I think we're so. At least I have, and maybe in the church and everything else, it's like it's one side or the other. That there's just somehow these other
Bigfoot
factions mixed. Like
it reminds
exactly.
me.
There you go. Well, you got the same. It's just like you said. You got the same problem with Bigfoot.
It's this neutral.
Yeah.
It's why the show started. It's why we call it Blurry Creatures, because there's this. It's like this neutral.
Well, I mean, is it a hybrid? Are they hybrids then? Is it some
I don't
kind
think
of?
so,
I mean,
no.
is what they're. So
now let's be clear. Let's be clear. Let's talk specifically about the Insectolins.
Yeah,
they seem to be the architects of the program, the breeding program. As I said, there's a hierarchy manifest on board their vessels, on board the UFO.
Well, this reminds me of kind of like when we dive into ancient history, Luke. Like some people say the Cyclops, the Cyclopean architecture of the megaliths. They're saying the Cyclops was a specific entity that was really good at masonry and making these things. So I don't know. I mean, it sounds like there are multiple. Well, that's why we call it blurry creatures, because they're blurry and there's many of them. My brain
is breaking. That's all I'm saying. It's breaking.
Let me
see Luke's mind right now.
Let me read this little portion from my book, because again,
go ahead,
I apologize. My brain is not functioning at optimal capacity right now.
So we're good. Yeah,
ours never do. So
this will help me, and it'll help clarify some things, because I'm not being very articulate tonight. So let me help us here by reading a paragraph here from my book. The reason why so many Christians struggle with and again, this is from my book, Birthright. The reason why so many Christians struggle with the notion of intelligent extraterrestrial life is because they are convinced that it contradicts the doctrines of Scripture. While the sentiment is understandable, it is also unfounded. The existence of extraterrestrials no more contradicts the gospel of Christ than the existence of angels. The work of Christ pertains exclusively to the sons of Adam. If Jesus did not die to atone for the sins of the angels, then why should we demand that he die for the aliens? Mankind was created for fellowship in the family of God, then corrupted through sin. Alien beings, such as the Insectolins, may also have been created for a purpose peculiar to our own, and then corrupted, even by the same serpent. Who can know the mind of the Maker or fathom the immensity of his creation? The Insectolins might have been conceived to accomplish a specific task in the hierarchy of the kingdom, perhaps related to the maintenance of life's genetic matrix. Does God not employ angels for specific tasks? Are men not also employed in the stewardship of the earth? Should we not expect to find fiercely intelligent entities explicitly designed to perform highly sophisticated functions? Such remarkable beings, if not part of the family, would not be made in the likeness of sons. And I go into that in the beginning of the book. I talk about.
Okay, my brain's getting put back together a little bit, Tim. Here, this is helpful.
Their physiology would be suited to their occupation and natural habitat. We need only to look to the diverse profusion of life forms on Earth, each species distinct from the other and ingeniously adapted to the environment for which it was designed, if we wish to glimpse the creative impulse of the architect of the universe. Let us not presume, therefore, to constrain the mind we cannot hope to comprehend.
It's a great point. Animal Kingdom, it's just a great point.
Yeah,
you have these very specific animals that have specific things and tools and beaks and claws and all these different things that are for their own.
Well, Tim, this reminds me of another idea, too, that that kind of you started the show with is this harvesting program. Not only are humans harvesting other humans, but it sounds like they're harvesting us too. Are they harvesting us to figure out our genes to turn us into abominations?
Okay. Let's talk specifically again about the Greys, because are there other factions out there? Let's clarify this real quick. I think so. Who are they? What are they? I have no idea. I just know that the Greys exist and that the breeding program is real. The abduction phenomenon is real. These UFOs that we see, that I've seen personally, maybe you guys have seen, I've seen it very close, in very close proximity, it's absolutely alien technology. It is not human technology.
And our government has this tech.
And
our government supposedly has some of this tech.
Some of it, yeah, they've reverse engineered some of it, and then we've made hybridized vehicles that have conventional components incorporated with some of the alien components, and we've created hybridized vehicles like the TR-3Bs. Those are hybridized. So the abduction program is not exploratory. The aliens aren't trying to figure out what makes us tick. They're not like us collecting insects and trying to figure out, the categorize the insects and so forth and conduct experiments. That's not what they're doing. They have a very specific agenda.
And my thought is they're trying to figure out how to crack our genetic to convert us into an abomination, something like that.
No, the abduction program is specifically designed to create human hybrids, alien human hybrids, and advanced alien human hybrids who Jacobs denominates as hybrids, because for all intents and purposes, they're us. They look exactly like us. We would not be able to distinguish them from us. I'm talking about the hybrids, and they use our genetic information. They use our genetic material, and they also use our wombs. They use the wombs of our females, and they're creating these offspring, and they've been doing this for over a century now. And I think that they're approaching the final stages of their program because they've been working through perfecting the hybrids. So in the beginning, you had hybrids were being produced that were very awkward looking, that were very grotesque. They had, they look more like the Greys. They look more like the aliens than they did like us, but they had elements of both. Most of the early hybrids, you had straggly hair, for example. They didn't have full heads of hair like us. Most of them had overly large eyes, extremely small mouths. Almost
like Gollum, from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, or I was going to say like the anime characters in some of these Chinese or Japanese cartoons, and they were not able to integrate into human society because this is the objective. The hybrids, the hubrids, their purpose is to integrate into human society. What's the end game?
So what's the difference? What's the difference between a Nephilim that happens on Earth and these entities? Are they the same?
Well, because Nephilim is a very specific categorization. Those were specifically the offspring of the Watchers. These are some people want to argue that the Greys or the Insectolins are the Watchers. I think that that's absurd. Honestly, I don't think that these are the Watchers. I mean, unless you think that the Watchers are insect-looking beings.
Aren't they imprisoned anyway?
No, that's another thing. That's a whole other conversation. What is a watcher? I think the word watcher is not as special as we think it is. Let's just, for the sake of clarity, when we think about a watcher, let's just think about a member of the elder race that has a specific rank in the kingdom. Okay, they have a specific role. They are guardians. Okay, because that's what watcher means.
It's like their job in the kingdom, right?
Okay,
yeah.
so these are high-ranking members of the elder race, just like human beings. We're all human beings, but some of us are generals in the military,
or princes,
or princes, or whatever. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but we're all human. So let's think about it the same way as it relates to the elder race. Okay, that really simplifies what we're talking about here when we talk about a watcher. So I think a watcher, I think they look like us. We're talking about the elder race. We're not talking about a reptilian being. And there's lots of reasons why I believe that the watchers were just the elder race, that they were the angels.
I guess that what I'm saying though is that like the offspring the Nephilim sounded like hybrid. They were a hybrid, and these other things are hybrids too.
But that's not what Nephilim means. Nephilim doesn't mean hybrid. Nephilim means offspring of the Watchers. Now, that's not the literal definition of what the word Nephilim means. Again, I believe it comes from the Aramaic. I actually like Heiser's work on this. I believe it comes from the Aramaic. I don't believe it comes from Nephal, to fall. I believe it's derived from the word giant in the Aramaic. So the Nephilim were specifically the offspring of the Watchers, the giant offspring of the Watchers, if you want to be even more specific. And that's it. They're not hybrids in general. They're not just chimeras. So if we create a chimera, if we take a monkey and we cross it with a human being, which they're doing in China, by the way, that's not a Nephilim. That's not an offspring of a Watcher. That's a result of a genetic experimentation. That's a monkey man. I mean, that's a chimera. That's a human. That's a chimera that was produced through genetic.
Yeah, we just interviewed Rob Skiba, and he kind of, a lot of people who they come on the show and they get a different idea in your mind, and he concludes that they're Nephilim hybrids. He kind of extends the word to include all the chimeras as well.
Well, a lot of people do that. A lot of people do that because it just seems convenient. But I think it's much more confusing than convenient. A Nephilim, you can't just take these definitions and plaster them over whatever you want, because then they lose their meaning. And in order to have understanding, then we have to have definitions that stay in their lanes. We can't go around calling everything a Nephilim. That's weird.
Sure.
That is very unhelpful, because you end up drawing erroneous conclusions. And so if you talk about a gray alien, if you're going to talk about a gray alien, the only way that gray alien would constitute as a Nephilim would be if it was the offspring of a Watcher or of any member of the elder race with a
Well, you're making me feel
female.
good, Tim, because we made a little promo for our show, and in the end, I classified aliens, Nephilim, Bigfoot, Dogman. You know what I mean? I classified all these things as separate things because the more the show barrels on, they do feel like different categories.
Or you can just simply say, I don't know what the hell a Dogman is, but it's not a Nephilim, unless it is the offspring of a Watcher and let me disabuse us of the term Watcher here, because it's not helpful. Unless it is the offspring of a member of the elder race with a member of the human race. That genetic composition, that's what a Nephilim is, and only that. Now, if we want to redefine the word Nephilim and make it mean anything, hybrid, then that's a different conversation. But I'm not interested in redefining the word Nephilim. I just want to understand Nephilim as it is defined, and not conflate other things with
it's like
Nephilim.
The further you get down the road, I guess that's just an elementary broad term. Like when people say demonic.
Exactly, and the word demonic has a different connotation because we use it in English in a different way, and the way we use it in English means nefarious, evil, wicked, and we when we think of demonic, we think of like The Exorcist and so forth, and that's that's all very accurate as it pertains in terms of The Exorcist is exactly accurate, but it's all accurate in terms of in English terms, in terms of the way we use it in English. According to the way we use it in English, that's an accurate definition of the word demonic. It just means something that's nefarious, something that is, we all know what the term demonic means, something that's evil. And that's okay. That's what the word demonic means in English, but that does not mean that something that is demonic is necessarily a demon or derived from a demon.
And do you feel called to try to label these terms and help explain to people like the differences?
No, not necessarily. I'm just trying to clarify things in my own brain. Okay. And so this is me thinking out loud, and it's, and in order to understand things in a much more accurate way, we have to have definitions that stay in their lane. Yeah. And if not, we're all going to have a general sense of something, but we're not going to be able to drill down and start to really delineate between creatures that are different from one another, for example. So if we return to the gray alien, if we go around calling gray aliens Nephilim, then what we've done is we have not increased our understanding of a gray alien. All that we have done is we have contributed to the confusion around we've contributed to the murkiness of the word Nephilim.
Yeah,
you understand what I'm saying? So we haven't done anything to enlighten our understanding about gray aliens. We just further conflated the word Nephilim by taking that word and applying it to the aliens. Now, look, I'm really good friends with L.A. Marzulli, and I think L.A.'s brilliant, and I love L.A.'s work. L.A. has an interesting theory. He believes that and I don't know if he still subscribes to this theory, but he believes that the aliens, the grays, are meat suits for the demons, for the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim.
Avatars.
Yeah. And I think that's very intriguing. I think it's very inventive. I think it's certainly a creative idea. And I can see how it can be compelling. I personally don't subscribe to it. And there's a very simple reason why I don't subscribe to it. We just got done talking about how the grays are dispassionate, how the grays are stoic, how the grays are subdued, how the grays are mechanistic. Does any of that sound like a demon to you?
Demonic possession? No, actually.
Yeah, like a psychopathic, murderous demon.
Yeah, think about...
Well, we brought on an exorcist, and he said that demons act like children when they're in people.
Yes, and I concur. Okay, I absolutely concur with that. That's a great way to say it. They act like little children, little evil children, and so think about the demons that Jesus casted out, the people who are writhing on the ground, foaming from the mouth, throwing themselves into the fire. Remember, and by the way, the demons do that to spite the bodies that are not, they don't have bodies of their own, so they take pleasure in hurting the bodies that they possess. By the way, that's why the people who demon possessed cut themselves. They also take pleasure, that's why these people are highly sexual also, and it's both. We're going to use this body for pleasure, and we're going to take revenge on the fact that we don't have bodies of our own, so we're going to hurt this body. Okay, so there's both of those dynamics are taking place with people who are possessed by demons. So we know the nature of demons; they're ravenous. I mean, think about the legion, the man who was possessed by the legion of demons. He was screaming and breaking his chains. Where the villagers would have to chain him up into tombs, and he would break his chains, and he was just ravenous and run around naked. Does any of this sound like a gray alien to you?
Does not.
The gray is. I write in my book that if you wanted to sit down and try and concoct the most unappealing biological creature for a demon to inhabit, you could do no better than a gray alien. Gray aliens don't have any sexual organs that anyone has ever reported. They don't even eat food through their mouths. They don't have. They're not even. They're not under their own. They're not acting under their own volition. They're worker drones. They're worker bees in this abduction program. I mean, and aside from all that, not to get, vulgar, but when a gray alien retrieves, when gray aliens, never one, it's a handful. When the gray aliens retrieve an abductee, let's say a woman, okay, when they retrieve the woman from usually her bedroom, and they take her into the craft. The first thing that they do is they strip her naked. It's the very first thing that happens when an abductee gets on board the alien vessel. Their clothes are removed by the grays, okay? And the grays they are then laid out on a table and incapacitated. So sometimes you have 200 plus human beings on some of these motherships that are being processed, in other words, abducted at the same time. So you have hundreds of naked women, again, not to be vulgar here, but let's think about this. Let's do some critical thinking here as it pertains to demons and grays. You have all of these naked women laid out on tables, and you have these stoic entities, these little gray aliens who don't have any sexual organs that anybody's ever reported, and they're just robotically walking around all of these incapacitated naked women, and you're going to tell me that those are demons?
Kind of reminds me of the eunuchs of the Old Testament.
Exactly. So you're going to tell me that those are demons?
No.
That those are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim inhabiting those meat suits? Why in the world? All they would want to do is get out of those bodies and into the bodies, that are laying on the tables next to those women, or again, not to be vulgar, but I mean, this is the reality. So we have to think about these things logically and process these terms correctly. So, are the Greys meat suits for the Nephilim? I would say that they are exactly antithetical to the kind of biological creatures that the Nephilim would want to inhabit. That the demons
it would make more
inhabit.
sense that the Nephilim would want to get, the spirits would want to get into something like a dog man or a Bigfoot. Seems to be coming and going anyways.
The gray aliens do not sexually assault the women. Okay, they don't. This is an important. I don't want to move on from this yet, because this is very important, because people who are struggling with this, as vulgar as this is a very, very important thought experiment here. Okay, the gray aliens, they disrobe the women and the men. They perform all kinds of invasive procedures on these men and women that have to do with their reproductive faculties, but they do not molest them, and they do not themselves engage in sexual intercourse with them.
They're like doctors, basically.
Now, exactly. That has nothing to do with the demon. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to say, though, I want to make it clear, because I know maybe people who are versed in the abduction material, the abduction research material. There are sexual encounters among abductees. Sometimes they're made to have sexual intercourse with each other or with hybrids. And usually when it's a hybrid, it's a female hybrid that comes and has sexual intercourse, very robotically, by the way. There's no pleasure involved here, with a male. And that is, again, related to the breeding program. Okay, so it's not that sexual activity doesn't take place on the vessel. It does, but not in the context of gray aliens. And so let's disabuse ourselves of this idea that gray aliens are demons. I think everybody listening right now can agree that they do not display the attributes of demons.
Can I just recap real quick? We've got the dragon, 7 princesses, right? And then we've got hybrids, we've got grays, we've got insectilins, and some of them are maybe
there's also reptilians.
And this is all happening off Earth.
Well, no. The abduction program is happening.
But
on
I mean,
Earth.
These aren't creatures from Earth.
No, these are all, well, unless you want to make the case that the grays and the insectilins are from the Earth.
It doesn't sound like they are.
Maybe
like inner Earth, like they come from
the inner Earth or something like
Hollow
that.
Earth or whatever. Yeah.
And again, I'm not opposed to that theory. I think it's intriguing. I just don't believe that the data points to that reality.
Well, I didn't know the word term was this big. I didn't know there were this many creatures involved in this discussion.
Steve and I used to talk about, Steve Quell and I used to talk about this a lot. And Steve believes, and I don't know. I tend to agree with Steve's thinking on this, but he believes that there are as many different kinds of aliens as there are insects on Earth. And he has stated that many times in radio programs, and some people have told him that, some contacts of his from the military and so forth.
Tim, we were just about, when we before got on the tangent, you were describing these hybrids that have been perfected. And it was trying to remind me, we have an 80s theme to our show. There's an 80s movie called They Live with Roddy Piper. Yeah. You remember, where you can see these aliens that look like people, right? Yeah, great movie, by the way. Terrible B movie, but amazing B movie at the same time. We'll say with the hybrid, you said the hybrids, they've been perfecting this breeding program for the hybrids to essentially look like us and blend in. And then we kind of were like, to what purpose? And then we got tangential.
Yeah. I tend to agree with Dr. David Jacobs, who postulates that the Greys are interested in planetary acquisition, that they want to possess our planet and control it for whatever reason. And Jacobs believes that they have already done this elsewhere in the universe. This isn't their first time, that they're simply engaging in their program of planetary acquisition. This time it happens to be the Earth. Now, I think something like that is probably true from my own perspective. Now, I could be wrong. Jacobs could be wrong. Maybe they are just following orders. Maybe they're following orders of the apostate sons of God, the dragon and his princes. Again, I don't know. That's one of my alternatives that I read earlier, but I'm not convinced that that's the case. So if it is planetary acquisition, a whole lot of what's going on right now makes sense in that context. Mike Adams believes that the Greys are terraforming the Earth right now, and that they're doing it in collaboration with nefarious elements of the human race. In other words, let's say a Luciferian faction, and they're terraforming the Earth. They're changing the weather on Earth and changing the atmosphere so that it's more accommodating to them, to their biology. That's intriguing. I think that's a very intriguing theory. I don't know exactly what the Greys want, but I do know what they're doing according to, again, the voluminous amount of scientific data that's available, that has been compiled by competent researchers for decades. And by the way, I don't include a whole lot of people in that designation, competent researcher. I think there's a very select few individuals, abduction researchers, who are competent researchers. And for those who are interested, I'll name off four right now. Bud Hopkins, the late Bud Hopkins, the late John Mack, Professor John Mack, who was the professor of psychiatry at Harvard. He's still alive. David Jacobs, who was the professor of history at Temple University, and the late Carla Turner, who was highly educated. Again, she had a doctorate in English. And all of those four, not just those four individuals, but those are the four, I think, most trustworthy, competent researchers as it pertains to the abduction phenomenon. And so when I'm talking about this phenomenon, when I'm talking about the Greys, it's not based on pure conjecture. It's based on the research. And I've read all of their works multiple times and have done I've listened to their lectures, and I've become a student of their work. And so I'm very well versed in it. And so it's important to know that when I'm talking about these things, again, I'm referencing, not directly, but in my own mind, I'm referencing the data. And it is data.
Right, so you're like John in Revelation, referencing the Old Testament.
It is data. It is data. It is scientific data, corroborated, and it has all of the.
And you said at the top of the hour, this is like your This is what you're most interested in besides the gospel, right?
I'm most interested in it because it is the most important thing happening on the earth right now. And it's the greatest threat that humanity has ever faced, aside from the transaction we made with the Watchers and the fallout from that transaction, which, by the way, was a transaction. And so it's the greatest menace to the human race. And so therefore, I find it the most intriguing. It's the most relevant, especially now, as you said, the things that are coming out in the news. We're beginning to see this narrative of this hostile alien threat, that these entities are now beginning to take a hostile posture. And this is kind of a new phenomenon, not the UFO phenomenon, certainly not. That goes back at least to by the way, let me say this. I do not believe that the Greys have been here for thousands of years. Obviously, the apostate sons of God have been here for a very long time. I think they were imprisoned here at one time, by the way, before Adam, imprisoned in the earth. The Greys, they're a relatively new phenomenon. They've only been around for a little over a century. Let's say a century and a half. The Greys, I believe, showed up at the end, at the turn of the century, in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, and before that, there really are not any accounts of alien abduction before that. Now, I know that people are going to want to cite Jacques Vallée. Everybody wants to cite Jacques Vallée, Passport to Mongolia. Or I think that's how you say it. Is it Mongolia or is it?
But there were UFO, like there's that famous UFO war over Nuremberg in like 1500s. So, but the Greys are after. Yes,
but let's understand what a UFO is. A UFO is an advanced aerospace vehicle. That's it. It's an advanced aerospace vehicle. Okay. Greys are not the only ones who manufacture and pilot advanced aerospace vehicles. The elder race manufactures, how else?
Which is just wild. It's wild
manufactures to think. And pilots advanced aerospace vehicles. Okay, let me digress briefly into a story that Gary Stearman has been telling recently. This is a story that happened to him when he was a young man. I'm not going to try and get all the details right, but Gary has said this publicly. He said it at our conference when we did the Gen 6 conference, the last one that was actually a public conference, a live conference where people could actually attend. And Gary Stearman had and I think you guys, are you familiar with Gary Stearman? Gary's a Bible scholar with Prophecy Watchers. I think some of your audience may be familiar with him. Phenomenal guy, brilliant guy. He's a great resource for a lot of. And Gary and I have talked at length about these things in private conversations. And what I'm telling you now is not private. He's said this publicly, that he had an experience when he was a young man. Long story short, and if you want to hear the full story, I think he's got it out there in interviews or something. Fascinating story. He was a young man. He comes from the Stearman family, obviously. They were involved in training the pilots in World War II with the Stearman aircraft. And so he's got this background of his family being pilots and engineers, and even aerospace engineers. And so Gary was a young man. He was piloting this small airplane. Long story short, something malfunctioned in the airplane, and Gary was he's gonna run into some real problems trying to land the airplane. And suddenly, there was a craft that appeared. I believe he said to his left. He's piloting this airplane thinking, I'm in trouble. I think the electrical system went out on him. And so he had a real big problem, a life-threatening problem. There was a malfunction on the aircraft. Again, this is just, I think it was a prop plane. I don't remember exactly what kind of an aircraft it was, a small plane. He was the only pilot. And so this craft, suddenly he looks over to his left. Actually, that's, if I remember right, and Gary, he heard a voice, almost like a telepathic communication or an audible voice inside of his aircraft. And it said, and this is always comical to me, and it's, you got to hear him tell the story. Like I said, he did at our conference. He heard a voice say, "If you look to your left, you will see a UFO." And Gary, he kind of, it was an audible voice. And so, or at least a telepathic voice. And he looked to his left, and out in the distance, I forget how far he said it was away, was this walnut-shaped metallic craft. Shiny metallic walnut-shaped craft. And all of a sudden, in the course of this experience, the craft suddenly came close to him, and it was really close to him, and he really got a good look at it. And he explains it in great detail. He's explained it to me in great detail. And he understood that there were beings inside this craft piloting this craft, and he felt almost an affection, both from him to them and to him from them, a familiarity with the entities piloting this craft. It was not like grotesque gray aliens. He believes that these were angelic beings, what I call the elder race, members of the elder race. Long story short, they saved his life. And it was that moment when he landed that plane, it was literally that moment that he decided to become a Bible scholar. That moment that he decided to become a Bible scholar. That moment that he decided to become a Bible scholar. That moment that he decided to become a Bible scholar.
So the good guys are flying around too.
Yes. Okay. So it really directed the course of his life. And of course, people got to go find this from Gary Stearman, his own telling of this story, because it's one of my favorite stories. I talk about it all the time with him because it's so fascinating and it's hilarious the way he tells it. So UFOs it's hardware. It's technological hardware. And so what we do, and by the way, I used to do this myself. I was doing this myself until Gary Stearman told me this story a long time ago, I don't know how many years ago, some 7 years ago or something. Gary Stearman told me the story I just told you, but of course in greater detail. And it literally, that moment when I went back to my hotel room after talking to Gary, my brain, the theological furniture in my brain started to get rearranged after I heard this story from Gary, because I was always under the assumption, I always equated UFOs with evil, UFOs wicked, UFOs fallen angels. It was a very simplistic way that I would process this reality, this UFO reality. And I realized that was very infantile.
Well, if you look at some of these videos that come up online, it looks like they're fighting each other. Have you seen those videos where it looks like there's streaks of lightning and there's like a galactic war happening? And
I believe that they are to some extent. So let's do this. A UFO is a piece of hardware. It's a piece of technology. It's technological hardware. It's nuts and bolts technological hardware, just like a Boeing jet, except much more advanced. Okay. And by the way, there's a synergistic relationship between the craft and the biology of the entities that fly it. It's very, very advanced. It's connected to them, to their brains. It's the vehicles are operated through thought, and there's other technologies that are intuitive and that are intrinsically linked to the or that are intimately linked to their biology. And I believe that technology is the same between the Greys and the elder race. The technology, I believe, comes from the elder race. We need to disabuse ourselves of this notion that UFOs are evil. It's just hardware. A UFO is not any more evil than a Ford truck. It's just a piece of hardware. It is a mechanism. It's a piece of technology. It is a vehicle of conveyance. We cannot ascribe to technology good or evil attributes. It's just technology. And so that's the way we need to think about these advanced aerospace vehicles.
It's angelic Tesla. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to put it. So
I'd like to add that no Ford trucks are evil except for the ones made in the '90s. Having an F-150 myself.
Yeah, when you think about a UFO, just think about your car.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we build that craft too. Like we build things out of machines, and so are they. Like, isn't that weird that if you say that they're like us and we're like them, we're all kind of crafty. We build stuff.
You're crafty.
Yes, exactly. We've been given the ability to do this to facilitate our civilization. And so have they. And so not only, they must manufacture them, okay? They must, because they crash. No, you want to think about a real intriguing question. Here's a real intriguing question. Do the good guys crash too?
Yeah.
I mean, the bad guys crash. By the way, I absolutely believe that Roswell was a crash disk, and there were gray aliens inside of it. Yeah. But do the good guys crash? I mean, they're not. These are not perfect entities. We're not dealing with perfect beings. We're dealing with beings of a higher nature than us. They're more intelligent than us. They have a more. Their physiology is superior to ours. So yes, but in the sense
we're junior hires and they're in college, kind of thing.
Exactly. Great way to say it, because we are the younger sibling.
Tim, so you were saying this is the greatest threat. So how does this end? Is a crescendo? Does it end with God stepping in and like?
Oh no, it ends at Armageddon. So yes, it does. Literally ends with God stepping in. It ends at Armageddon.
Okay.
Now let me frame Armageddon very quickly for you without getting into the weeds, because there's a lot of weeds around Armageddon. Everybody's familiar with Armageddon, that this is a battle between the nations, the pagan nations of the earth against Israel at the end of the age. Is that true? Well, yes, it is true, but that's not the overarching thrust of Armageddon. It's not the full panorama of what Armageddon is. Armageddon is a battle against Christ, the return of Christ. It is resisting the return of the earth's rightful king, the rightful heir of Adam, who is returning to the earth to restore the dominion of mankind on planet Earth, which is going to be usurped. It was usurped in the Genesis 6 affair through hybrids. It's going to be usurped again through hybrids at the end of the age. But this time, Christ is going to first destroy the empire of the beast, and this happens with the breaking of the seals of the scroll. I'm not going to go into detail on that's another conversation. But the crescendo of all of this is the return of Christ. He returns at Armageddon with the armies of heaven in his train, and he vanquishes the beast. It's not Israel that vanquishes the beast. It's Christ. Yeah. It's Jesus of Nazareth who returns, who's seated at the right hand of the Father, returns to the earth and vanquishes the beast. Let me explain something to everybody listening. This is not a spiritual war. This is a kinetic war. This is a conventional war in the sense that it is going to look like armies fighting armies. And of course, not with tanks and, long-range missiles and things of this nature. We're talking about high technology. The context of the war is framed in Psalm 2, which I talk a lot about in my book. Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth and the rulers set themselves against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bonds asunder and cast their cords from us. So this is the nations of the earth. The kings and the rulers, by the way, these are two different groups. The kings of the earth, but the rulers, I think, are the sons of God, the apostate princes. By the way, the word principality, because I almost said principality, but that's the word principality that's not an entity. A principality is a realm governed by a prince. So when the Bible says principalities, it's talking about realms. The earth is not the only realm in the kingdom. It's not. There are other realms governed by this other sons of God. And I make that, I think I make an ironclad case for that in my book, by the way, because it's just, the Bible is replete with language that is indicating this, that is insinuating this. Okay. So there are other realms. The earth is not the only realm. The earth is our realm. It's the realm that we've been given the vice regency of. So, and by the way, only us. So, the Armageddon is the return of Christ. Let's kind of frame everything we've talked about here so that we can bring some of these ideas to a conclusion for people. So you have the Greys, you have the apostate sons of God. And when I say the Greys, I'm mixing in the Insectolans, all that faction. You have the apostate sons of God. How they are related, how they're working together or not working together, I don't know. But I do know where this is all headed. It's all headed to war with God. Literally, it is headed to a kinetic war with the return of Christ, with the returning Christ and the armies of heaven. That's where this is going. And now we can imagine the kind of weapons because here's a question that this has always stumped me. And it was one of the questions that really started me on this path that I'm on now and that I've been on for, over a decade or whatever it's been. I read Psalm 2 and I was just pondering Psalm 2. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop in Cleveland, Ohio, kind of in a rough neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio, sitting in this little diner, not a coffee shop, a diner at 12 o'clock at night, drinking, sucking down 6 cups of coffee with this friend of mine. And I asked him,
sounds wild.
I said, I was just so I couldn't stop thinking about Psalm 2. And I said, I don't understand. What kind of weapons do you bring in a war with God? Obviously, the nations are planning on going to war with God. What is emboldening them? What is giving them this confidence, the kings of the earth and the rulers, to go to make war with the King of heaven, with the Son of God and the armies of heaven? And it took me a long time to realize that we're talking about a kinetic war and we're talking about advanced technology. And then when I started to do the research, get into the research, the UFO, into ufology, into the research of UFOs and aliens and so forth, I began to understand what kind of technology and what would give the nations this confidence that they can go to war with the Son of God. And by the way, the Son of God is coming to claim the throne that rightly belongs to him. It is the throne.
It sounds like, when I was reading Jasher like last week, they wanted to build the Tower of Babel and have that war. And that's what originally scattered the nations, right? They thought they could actually build that thing high enough. And it says in Jasher, they were shooting arrows into heaven, and they were...
There's something very esoteric going on in that story, but I think you're right in the premise that there was this hubris that we can defy God. That's what, Nimrod's name means, rebel. So there's that same hubris that Nimrod had, the rebel, the great rebel, who wasn't just rebellious against God, was defiant. Now, this is very important that I go through in my book. There's a difference between denial and defiance. We're used to atheism. Atheism is denial. We're used to, Richard Dawkins and the late Christopher Hitchens, and these other guys, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, all those guys, those famous neo-atheists who are out there, always trying to dismantle the Christian faith in favor of atheism. And so we're used to atheism. We're used to denial. We live in a culture of denial, but this culture, this zeitgeist of denial of the 21st century, of the 20th century, now going into the 21st century, is going to evolve into defiance, open defiance. So there's a difference. Denial says, this is the atheistic creed. Denial says God does not exist, or the gods do not exist, that they're just figments of man's imagination. There is no historical fact to the gods, the Christian God or any other God, except, of course, for man becoming a God. That's a different conversation. So that's atheism. That's denial. Defiance is not denial. Defiance is not a position. It's not a posture that declares that God does not exist, that the gods do not exist. The posture of defiance is God does exist, and we will depose him, or we will destroy him, or we will rebel against him. It's a different posture. It's not a posture of denial. It is a posture of defiance. The nations are being manipulated. They're being directed from denial to defiance. Denial was Darwin. Defiance was Nietzsche and Crowley.
Yeah.
And I go through this in the book. And so we're being moved from a posture of denial into a posture of defiance. Now, what is going to move that scale? Because the atheist doesn't believe in God. The apotheotheist, which is another term I coined, apotheotheism is the religion of the future. I coined that term because it mixes apotheotheism. By the way, the coffee's kicked in. It's mixed in the.
We're back in the diner. I was super
tired in the beginning.
Yeah.
We're back in the diner. So the apotheotheism is the amalgamation of apotheosis, which people are familiar with. That term means to become a god. That's the if someone is apotheosizes, they become a god. They join the ranks of the gods, and this is what they believed about the Caesars. The Romans believed about their Caesars and so forth, that when they died, they were apotheosized.
The pharaohs in Egypt.
Gods, the pharaohs and so forth. They join the ranks of the gods, the fellowship of the gods. That's apotheosis. But then theism is the belief in the gods. So you have these two ideas which I have combined. You have the idea that we are going to become gods ourselves, or we're going to join the gods, but that necessitates the belief in the gods, not some abstract notion that we're going to become godlike according to the mythologies. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that the atheist. There are going to be no atheists in the future. There will be no atheists on planet Earth
Just
at the end of the age.
Only theists, right?
There's only going to be apotheotheists, those who believe that the gods do exist in terms of the secular realm, let's say, because there's going to be Christians too. There's going to be apotheotheists, those who believe that the gods do exist and we can become like them.
And the Golden Age was like that as well, right?
Well, that's exactly like.
Well, that's the original. That's the original lie, right? You could be like God. That's the apple. It's the serpent in the garden.
And so now let's plug in the gray aliens into this equation. This the apotheotheism. So we're going from denial to defiance. We're headed for Armageddon. Let's plug in the grays. We have a threat right now. We have the, as I said, the greatest menace to the human race are the grays, is the abduction program, are the hybrids that are even now beginning to assimilate into human society. We cannot distinguish them, the hybrids, from human beings. We cannot distinguish them, except for they retain, by the way, the telepathic powers of the grays. They retain the ability to telepathically manipulate human beings. So it's almost like Sith lords walking around.
MK Ultra in your brain.
Yeah, but exactly. Yeah. Yes. Just like that. So we have this threat. Now, understand that elements of our military, certainly elements of the military-industrial complex, understand that threat. They know that these are the grays and that they represent a clear and present danger, not only to the United States, but to the Earth at large.
Is that Space Force?
I don't know if that's what Space Force was for, but we have a secret space program that Trump or Biden or Obama, none of these guys have any idea about. And again, this is the breakaway civilization. These are the people who are not under any jurisdiction. They're loosely associated with the government of the United States, or with perhaps, China's trying to get into that game as well. So we have this scenario in which we have this threat, the gray threat, the alien threat, and the government knows about it. And we're seeing this disclosure. This is what the disclosure is. Watch carefully. This is what the disclosure is. Listen to what Tucker Carlson is saying. Listen to what even the talking heads at CNN are saying when they talk about UFOs. What is the context? National security threat. But this isn't a national security threat. This is a global security threat. And so this is going to cause the first world nations of the earth to have to come together to attempt to repel this hostile force. By the way, I was about to say that the word I was looking for before, when my brain was not functioning properly, was posture. The UFOs are now taking a hostile posture, this is a new development in this saga of ufology. They've done this to some extent in the past, but now they're hovering over our aircraft carriers. Now they're hovering over our battleships. Now they're tailing our fighters. Now they're hovering over our
nukes,
our secret underground military installations, and our nuclear silos. And they're hovering there. They're not doing anything. They're just making a statement, an unspoken statement. We know where you are. We know where your assets are, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. That's what's happening right now. And so the Pentagon is getting in front of this because it's leaking now. There's too many airmen and seamen and different members of the intelligence communities and the armed forces who are encountering these craft now. So the Pentagon is getting in front of it, is trying to control the narrative. This is a clear and present danger, the likes of which we've never seen a danger this acute on Earth in terms of the the ramifications for the human species. Because remember, they're not just showing up in their craft, they are integrating themselves into our populace. They do the opposite of the Borg from Star Trek. Rather than assimilating other civilizations into their collective, they assimilate themselves into ours. And it's subversion. It's a conquest of subversion.
Tim, do you think there's an encounter of the fifth kind that happens, like where they step out and there's this like full disclosure, like we're here? Or do you think that's what happens with the sons of?
That's happening, but it's not like a step out of the craft and say,
like on CNN and here they're at the White House lawn.
No, because this is they're subversive. I believe that the Greys are approaching the end of their program. They're not there yet. They're not there yet because the hybrids have to learn how to live on Earth. They have to learn how to do the menial tasks of life on Earth. They have to learn what a TV is, what a refrigerator is, how to drive a car, what to do how to shop for groceries, what to do at a red light. They have to learn how to integrate into society because it is subversion. Remember, it's planetary acquisition. It's subversion. So that's what the breeding program is about. And so we have this threat. Elements of our government know. Other people at the Pentagon who were not privy to the alien threat are now becoming briefed. They're not getting briefed. Elements of our Congress are being briefed about the alien threat. And let me be, again, specific, the gray alien threat. We are going to, in my opinion, in my estimation, insectilins. It's like something out of a sci-fi horror flick. And these are the entities that are acquisitioning the Earth, that are acquisitioning our planet, that are subversing us from within. There's no way we can stop them. We don't even know who the hybrids are. And maybe, by the way, maybe that's some of what's going on. Just process that for a moment. Maybe elements of the military-industrial complex or even of the Pentagon are trying to find out who the hybrids are and where they are. Let's factor that into some things that might be happening. So now we have this dichotomy between these grotesque beings, and then suddenly these beautiful entities show up using the same kind of technology, maybe even superior. They show up on the scene, and people get really upset with me when I talk about this because they think I'm making some kind. They think that I am making some kind of a racial commentary here. Like this has something to do with race. It doesn't. It has nothing to do with race. Banish that from your mind. But these entities, when they show up, I believe, and there's reasons I believe this, and anybody who knows anything about ufology understands some of the reason why I believe this. It has nothing to do with racism. These entities, the dichotomy with these Greys, these entities are going to be extremely handsome. They're going to look like us. We look like them. They're probably going to be fair-skinned. They're probably going to have blue and green eyes and blonde hair or golden blonde hair. They're the golden race. They're going to look like Apollo is depicted in Greek mythology. Golden-haired, fair-skinned, handsome. They're going to show up on the scene, and they are going to offer their assistance in defeating the Greys.
It sounds like our whole political system right now, where they create the problem and they present themselves as the solution. They project these issues, they project these problems, and they come in and say, "Oh, we're going to do something about this." It's like, and you dig a little deeper, like you're the one who created the problem.
That's a possibility. That's one of my alternatives. Are they working with the Greys to create this conflict? My sense is no. My sense is maybe they were helping to direct the breeding program, but maybe under false pretenses. Maybe they're going to stab the Greys in the back. I don't know. There's any number of alternatives here. But one thing I can tell you for sure, they're going to show up to save us. And by the way, these are not, I think I said the apostate sons of God. That was a mistake. Let me back up and correct that. These are not the apostate sons of God, Apollo and his consort, the golden race who's going to show up to save us. These are the sons, the hybrid sons of the apostate sons of God.
Okay.
These are their hybrid sons. They are going to be part human and part elder race, part human race, part elder race.
So like the Rephaim, is this like the second Is it like?
Yes, but I don't believe they're going to be giants. Right. I believe they're going to be 6.5 to 7 feet tall, maybe 8 feet tall. And they're going to be very attractive. Are there going to be females among them? I don't know. I can tell you one thing. There's going to be 7. There's going to be 10.
That's Revelation. 10. Yeah, there's the 10. Yeah.
And in my estimation, there's going to be 10. And they're going to be led by Apollo. And Apollo is going to be literally the hybrid son of the dragon himself.
And he suffers a mortal wound and comes back to life.
Yes, because what's next? What happens next in my timeline?
The war.
Now, again, let me say, I completely accept the possibility that I am dead wrong and that this whole timeline is fictitious. But nevertheless, I'm giving you my perspective. So they show up, they deliver us from the graves. If they deliver us from the graves, the whole world, the nations will worship them. But not just worship them, they will long to become like them. Because now you're talking about the sharing of new information, technology that will be useful to humanity, very useful to humanity. Now you're talking about a new paradigm. There's this golden race now that's shown up. We're not alone in the universe. These guys are superior to us in every way. They have superior technology. They have superior knowledge. And they're going to be able to do all kinds of things for our civilization. Again, these are not the apostate sons of God. It's their offspring. And they're going to reveal to us that, in my estimation, this is where I think the trajectory is going. They're going to reveal to us that mankind was engineered by their fathers, and that they represent, the golden race. And by the way, this is predicted by the Sibylline oracles. What I'm saying right now is literally predicted, that the golden race is going to descend from heaven and that a new golden age is going to begin. That's what I'm talking about. This has been predicted by the pagan oracles from thousands of years ago. And I think also it's predicted in the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation, and other places. So they're going to tell us that their fathers created us and that we are on this evolutionary path and that we're ultimately supposed to become like them. They are the prototype of what we can become, the next level in our evolution. And when this happens, by the way, this is very complex, and I bring all these things together in the book. When this, I don't think this is going to happen tomorrow. People get really upset with me when I say this, and I don't understand why this is such a point of contention with people. I don't believe this is going to happen for a few generations down the line. I think we got time left. I think this is literally going to happen at the end of the age. The end of the age is not an abstract concept. It's not whatever you want to make it. It is the end of the age. We are in the age of Pisces. We are going to enter Aquarius. This is not astrology. This is the way that the ages have been reckoned since the beginning, since Adam. And it's reckoned through the Hebrew Mazzaroth as well, which is the zodiac, same thing. And so when I talk about this is not some occult or pagan thing. This is the way that ages have been calculated since the beginning of humanity on planet Earth. And so at the end of the age, the literal age that we're in now, I think that's when these things are going to happen. I won't get into why I think that we have a couple hundred years to go, maybe a few hundred years to go, maybe more, maybe less, somewhere in that ballpark, based on the passing of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. That is the age. And we're, by the way, by all accounts, we are at the end of the age, because the ancients reckoned that the last 500 years or so of an age, and age is 2,160 years, that the last 500 years of that is the end of the age. You start the countdown to the end of the age. You're in the end of the age when you get into the last few hundred years. So we are in the end of the age, but we are not at the very end of the age yet. That's a different conversation, and there's a lot to unpack there, and we won't bother to do that now. But the point is that when these things converge, because I don't know if I talked about this last time we talked, there's a convergence. There's a convergence that's going to happen at the end of the age, and very quickly. It's three components that I think are going to converge, and when they converge, it's going to give rise to a new golden age, an Apollo revealed. So this is the beast being revealed. This is when we're like right on the razor's edge of the return of Christ. These three things are going to converge. These are three components, and as I tell you what they are, think in your minds the way that these things are already beginning to converge. Number one, the new religion. There's a new religion that's being formulated right now. It is what I call apotheotheism. The second thing is the alien threat, which we've been talking about, which we're already seeing the beginnings of this thing rolling out. And the third component is the post-human paradigm, which is the convergence of the green technologies, the convergence of the genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and all the other biotechnologies that are developing at an exponential pace right now. They're going somewhere. It's going to give us the ability to fundamentally alter our biology and to become post-human. In other words, non-human. And the transition between human and post-human, that's called transhuman. That's where we're entering right now. We're not into the post-human paradigm yet. We are just beginning to enter the beginning of the transhuman paradigm, the transition from human to post-human. That's going to take time. When these three things,
that's to usurp our dominion,
yes,
correct?
Our authority on earth.
Yeah.
But but so many people have said they're speeding this whole thing up. The George Soroses of the world are dying out, and they're trying to speed up some things. So I've heard some people say that it feels fast-tracked.
Well, everybody says that. I want you to understand that if you lived, let's say that you were born sometime at the turn of the century. Okay, let's say you were born at the turn of the century. So by the time the Great War, World War I happened, you were draft age. You're 16, 17, 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, 19 years old. During World War I, you get drafted into World War I. You see the horror, the absolute horror of World War I, which was a horror that we can't even really contemplate. We don't understand what that war looked like. It was bloody. It was horrendous. World War I. It was megadeth. It was just, mechanized. It was that old mechanized warfare that was so gruesome. Then, and it doesn't matter where you were, and let's say you were born in America. Let's make this specific to us. So then you make it through World War I. You survive World War I somehow. What happens right on the heels of World War I? You're coming home from World War I, and guess what you're coming home with? The Spanish flu.
Depression. Yeah. You're
coming home with the Spanish flu that killed millions of people in America, I believe, right? I forget what the number was, but it was, let's just put it this way, 1,000 times worse than coronavirus. The Spanish flu was a real pandemic. It's just eradicating human beings all over the world, in the United States and everywhere else. It was a true pandemic. It was way worse. Coronavirus is a joke compared to the Spanish flu. That was literally right on the heels of World War I. So now, let's say you were lucky enough to survive the trenches and the Spanish flu. That lasted for however many years it lasted. So you come home from fighting the war, and now you're watching your brothers and sisters and family members dropping dead from the Spanish flu. Let's say you survive it. Okay. Some years later, guess what happens? The Great Depression. The economy crashes. So now you've seen World War I, the freaking Spanish flu, and the Great Depression. And if you're lucky and you survive all that, you live long enough to see the rise of Adolf Hitler in World War II. And there were a lot of people like this, our grandparents and great-grandparents.
Yeah, but now we have the technology to change DNA, and we're doing it.
Yes, but let's think about how much more people living, our great-grandparents, how much more logical it would have been for them to think that they were in the end times.
Sure.
We have not seen, our generation, we have not seen a world war. We've never seen the detonation of a nuclear bomb.
I was about to say that. Yeah, the nuke, then you realize you can obliterate the entire planet, and you're like, this is the end, right?
We're a bunch of pansies. Yeah. We're a bunch of cream puff pansies. We think it's the end times because we're going through coronavirus. Let me tell you something. There's a lot worse things that are going to unfold before we reach the end. We are going from denial to defiance. Jesus isn't going to just show up because it's time. He's going to show up to vanquish the beast who's gathered against him, who's gathered an army to resist his return. And I believe that at that time, when we get there, the vast majority of people living on planet Earth will no longer be human. They're going to be post-human. There will be a remnant of human beings left, most of whom will be believers and are resisting the beast and are resisting the upgrade. And by the way, that upgrade, the final step in that journey to post-humanism, I believe is going to be a component of the Apollo, of his own DNA or of their DNA, the elder race, incorporated into our DNA, and that is the mark of the beast. It's the genetic marker of Apollo that completes our transition out of Adam. Mm-hmm. And by completing that transition out of Adam, it allows the beast to take authority and to govern the earth. The Bible says that he is permitted to rule for a while. And he is permitted because he...
Oh, hey, look, a UFO.
Mater, that was a hubcap.
No, it was a UFO, and I know because I done seen one once.
What?
Yep, it was a crystal... My name is Mater.
My name is Mator.
Mator, huh.
What we're seeing right now is nothing compared to what's coming. Nothing. The earth is going to be a dystopic nightmare at the end of the age, full of post-humans who are not in denial of God, but in defiance of him, because the gods of old are going to be walking among us, just like the golden age. And those gods are going to be, by the way, the apostate sons of God and their hybrid offspring. And people are going to look at them and they're going to say the gods do exist. They're not these mythological creatures that, beings that throw lightning bolts down and that carry the sun across the sky in a chariot. No, they're like us. They're just like us, except they have more knowledge, more technology, and they're of a better physiological nature than us. But we can become like them. And furthermore, we can ally ourselves with this faction, the dragon and his princes and his hybrid offspring, and we can depose this other God, Yahweh, and these pretender gods who have been manipulating and who have been persecuting and who have been subduing mankind through religion and blah, 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 blah. And now we can understand what kind of weapons of war, what kind of weapons do you bring in a war with God? And now we can understand what's emboldening the nations to go to war with God, because they have allied themselves with the gods and are becoming like them and are now sharing in that same hubris of the dragon, of the serpent of old, who said that he will ascend the mount of God. He will become like God. It's the same impulse. It's that same hubris and arrogance.
It's the same lie.
And
it's the
defiance.
Same deception.
And that's where this is headed. That's where this is headed. It's not headed to some kind of a terrestrial battle between Israel and its neighbors. That is symbolic. Christ is returning not to vanquish the human enemies of Israel, but to vanquish the beast and his post-human army who are allied with the apostate princes of the elder race.
I love it, Tim. You're awake, man. There's the last of that coffee right there.
It took me a while, but my brain finally turned on.
Why does God let it go on for so long? Why does it get so bad? Why does it, Because we are the vice regents of earth. God himself does not usurp our authority. He's given it to us. We're the vice regents. Now,
whether we rule according to the kingdom of heaven or not, there's consequences for that. God will depose any human king and appoint any human king he wants. That's for sure. But he allows us to govern the earth. The Bible says that when a righteous man is in authority, the people rejoice. When a wicked man is in authority, the people mourn. It's the authority of Adam. God gave Adam the deed of the earth. You are the vice regent, not just you and your offspring are the vice regent of the earth. It was given to Adam. Remember what Paul says, that the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. So the gift, the calling, the endowment of dominion of the earth given to Adam is irrevocable. The sons of Adam will govern the earth, good, bad, or indifferent. And they will reap the benefits, or they will pay the price for how they govern the earth. The devil and the dragon and his princes do not directly govern the earth. They do not have the authority to govern the earth like the sons of Adam. The Bible is very clear about this. In the Psalms, it says that the heavens, even the heavens are the Lord's, but the earth he has given to the sons of men, not to Satan, not to fallen angels, not to demons. The earth he has given to the sons of men. And so on earth, we have the authority. We have dominion on earth. And that's why we who are on earth, human beings, are going to judge the angels. Which angels are we going to judge? The ones that the ones that transgressed in our realm. The ones that came to our domain and transgressed in our realm will be judged by us, because we are the regents of the earth. In the same way that if I go to Peru and break the law, I don't get judged in courts in America. I get judged by the Peruvian authorities and the courts in Peru, regardless of who I am, what kind of what my status is in terms of my citizenship. It doesn't matter. If I break the laws of Peru in Peru, I am subject to the authorities there. This is a cosmic principle. This is a cosmic principle. This is why the authority of mankind on the earth is enforced by the armies of the kingdom. There are armies in the kingdom of heaven. None of us would dispute that. You can't. The language of Scripture is martial in its tones.
I know.
It's laced with martial overtones. From beginning to end, there's a kingdom, there's a king, and there are armies. Why do those armies exist? Well, those armies exist because there are hostile factions. There are enemies who are able to conduct kinetic war with the kingdom of heaven. That's why Jesus said the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. I don't think that's some metaphysical spiritual principle. I think that's literal. That's a literal truth. And so there's this kinetic conflict that's taking place between the members of the elder race who are in the kingdom and loyal to the king, and those apostate princes, the dragon and his princes, and all of the apostate factions that have allied themselves against the king of heaven. And by the way, the dragon knows his days are numbered. And he's doing everything he can to resist the return of who I call the dragon slayer, according to the prophecy that was given to the serpent in the garden, that one would be born, a son of Adam would be born through the virgin womb. If you look at the prophecy, this is what it's saying: through the virgin womb of a daughter of Eve, who would slay the dragon, who would crush his head, and that human deliverer, he was coming through the line of Adam. That's why Christ's genealogy doesn't just go back to David. It goes all the way back to Adam, because it's not just about David and Israel. It's about Adam and the human race. And that's why when Jesus returns, he takes the scroll from the right hand of the Father. He's able to take that scroll, which is the deed of the earth, dominion of the earth, because mankind is going to lose it at the end of the age because of this post-human condition. We're going to lose authority of the earth because you must be human in order to appropriate the human dominion that was bestowed to Adam and his offspring forever. But you know what? Jesus takes the scroll, he breaks the seals, only he is able to do it, that he takes dominion of the earth. Why does he have the authority to do that? Because he is human. He is human in the line of Adam. He has all authority on the earth as the Son of Man. He has all authority in heaven as the Son of God. And so when he returns to the earth, to vanquish the beast, he is returning as a son of Adam to take back dominion of the earth, that he is the rightful heir of Adam's dominion. He has all authority to do it and to occupy that throne. And when he takes back the earth for us, and he seats himself on the throne of his father David, he is a human king. He is the second Adam, and he is going to do what the first Adam failed to do, which is govern the earth according to the will of the Father and according to the kingdom of heaven. He's going to succeed where Adam failed, and he's going to do it for us. And he's going to do it for us. And he's going to do it for us. And he's going to do it for us.
Dang.
There's our hope right there. That's the hope.
This is the story of the gospel. It's part of the story of the gospel, and it's why everything that's unfolding is unfolding. It's all going to crescendo in Armageddon and the return of Christ, and this battle between the son, the hybrid son of Satan, who has usurped the authority of Adam, and he's done so legally. Remember, he's a hybrid. He's human enough to appropriate the authority of
Yeah, so he's the false Messiah, right? He's the exact antithesis of Christ.
He is an imposter. He's going to say he is the true Christ, and Jesus of Nazareth is the imposter. And that, it's Luciferianism. It's the Bible upside down. It's the antithesis
Right, yes,
of the
because
gospel.
he's the son of the dragon. So he's
Exactly.
the antithesis.
And that his father is Optimus Maximus, the greatest of all gods. Optimus Maximus, that was the title of Jupiter, and who was an aspect of Zeus. And that's how, by the way, that's how the dragon and his princes have authority in the earth. They have proximal authority. They get their authority from us. And the primary way that they do that, by the way, is through idolatry. When we worship other gods, when we willfully worship other gods, bow our knee to other gods, we are abdicating our authority. We are allowing them to have direct influence in our realm. But make no mistake about it. Neither the devil nor his angels nor any other entity besides a hybrid has ever occupied a throne of Adam, a human throne. And people say, well, the devil's the God of this world. He's the God of the world in the sense that the whole world is under his influence. And when people think about the devil being the God of the world, you have to remember that those words were written during the height of the Roman Empire. The patron deity of Rome was Jupiter. The Caesars of Rome were considered to be the subjects of Jupiter, even the offspring of Jupiter.
The demigods.
And they sacrificed to Jupiter. And before them, the Greeks to Zeus. This is an aspect of the dragon of Satan. So they were abdicating their authority to the dragon. And so the dragon and his angels wield proximal authority in the earth. They rule from behind the thrones.
Yeah, because Caesar's still sat on the throne.
Exactly. Caesar. And there is no president or prime minister today who is not a human being. And these people are not just puppets. They're not just puppets of the devil. These people are subject to their own carnality. And the devil takes advantage of our carnality, because when we subject ourselves to the carnal desires of the flesh, we are rejecting the Spirit of God, and we then become willing pawns in the devil's game. We are easily manipulated because we have subjected ourselves to our own carnal desires. And that's why the devil and his angels entice the world to sin and to rebel against God, because then they become putty in their hands. They're easily manipulated and again, become willing pawns in the, willing perhaps even unwitting, willing pawns in the devil's game. And this is how authority works on the earth. So the devil does not rule this earth. The earth was never given to Satan. And this is important to understand for the conclusion of where all this is headed. The devil does not govern the earth. He is not the king of the earth, or he does not have dominion on the earth. We do. And guess what? To some degree, he is subject to our dominion, because if we don't give him authority, if we don't abdicate our authority to him, a righteous king that God raises up in Israel, who is righteous, who's like David, who was a man after his own heart, who governs according to the kingdom of heaven and gives no place to the devil. The devil therefore has no authority in Israel or in the governance of David, let's say, right? Until that king or that potentate is enticed to sin against God and to give in to some kind of a carnal vice. And it's at that point that the devil begins to be able to exert authority through his human proxies. This is how the authority of the dragon operates on earth. And we need to disabuse ourselves of the notion that Satan is the ruler of the earth and the king of the earth. No, he's not. No, he's not. He is subject to our authority. And when I say our authority, by the way, I'm not just talking about the authority of Christians. I'm talking about to the authority of mankind, the sons and daughters of Adam. And so, and by the way, I apologize for going on that rant, but I wanted to at least get out as much clear thinking, because really the beginning of this show, I had a lot of brain fog going on. I was trying to come out of a stupor. I've been training really hard in the gym, and it just leaves me brain dead for the rest of the day. But the coffee finally kicked in, and I wanted to get out as much clarification as I could there.
No,
again,
I love
Yeah,
the rant.
that's awesome.
I don't know how I used to read the Bible, but it seems like you're born into a war that is hard to wrap your mind around, but it's there and it's real. It's hard to go back. You can't go back to seeing it. It just feels like so many people are asleep to so many of these themes. It's kind of sad.
Well, it's like a sci-fi movie that happens to be
Yeah.
true, happens to be real. And it's unfolding around us, so it's not just some conjecture. As I said, remember this. The new religion is unfolding. Now, that one's a little bit harder to detect because you have to know where to look. The new religion is unfolding. The post-human paradigm through transhumanism is unfolding. And the alien threat through this awkward disclosure is beginning to unfold. The three things that I put in my book before a lot of this was happening, or at least before I conceptualized this notion, are slowly converging and pictured as three concentric circles, but they're not yet mixed. They're like a little bit, let's say an inch away from each other, but they're slowly moving together, and they're going to converge, and they're going to press together, and the convergence is going to lead to a new golden age. In other words, another Genesis 6 type episode on planet Earth, the revealing of Apollo and the Battle of Armageddon.
Dang. It's like the Rambo version.
So Tim, I know you've written a lot of this in your book, and you said you're actually doing videos now. You're doing where you walk through some of the concepts in this, correct? And is that what you were talking about early on the show? Yeah,
I have a lot of people know that I was banished from YouTube some years ago, overnight. I didn't even get like any strikes or nothing. They just took my channel down.
Jeez.
And I just quit YouTube for a long time, but I ended up, we did have a channel at Gen 6, which was the channel I created. And I did an experiment last year. I said, what if I change this to my name? Let's see if YouTube the algorithm will catch that and take it down. So I did that. And then I further experimented by, doing a video about my book, and I let that go for a while. And apparently either YouTube doesn't care anymore, or they haven't realized that it's another Timothy Alberino channel. And so I've been able to resume producing content on YouTube. And I'm doing it slowly. I'm taking my time, and I'm doing a series right now on the book, on the what I'm calling the Birthright series. It's a lecture series. It's on the content of the book, and I'm going methodically through some of the most important aspects, themes in the book. And I'm taking my time, and I'm doing it 10 to 15 minute videos. I want to just give people a little bit at a time to digest and think about. And what's really killing me and what's really taking a long time is I'm doing it in English and in Spanish. So if you're a Spanish speaker, or you have somebody in your family that doesn't speak English, only Spanish, this is a good resource. I've already done 3. the first 3, which covers some of what we've talked about today. It's kind of laying the theological framework, the groundwork, in a much more eloquent way, by the way, than I was bumbling in the beginning of this interview. It was much more eloquently laid out in the videos. And so I encourage people to go to YouTube, just type in my name, Timothy Alberino. You'll see my channel. You'll see that there's 6 videos that were recently posted. 3 of them are in Spanish, but please understand, everything that's in Spanish is also in English. And those lecture series that are in English are also in Spanish. So if you land on the Spanish page, just go back to my channel and watch the corresponding one in English, because they're all in English also.
So YouTube wasn't ready for the second coming of Tim Alberino.
Well, not so far. I also have started. I haven't done it. I haven't posted anything yet. There, I've played around with different social media stuff. I was banned off of Facebook. Like I tried to open an account. I had an account for one day, and then they banned me. I didn't even post anything. And then so I tried Twitter, and I was on Twitter for a while, and I didn't like where the Twitter stuff was going.
Yeah.
And so I got off of Twitter. So now I'm trying Instagram, and it's basically just for people to track with me, to see when I'm posting new videos, to see what I'm doing, because I'm doing other stuff. I'm going on expeditions and things, and I'll be posting a bunch of stuff from past. I know there's nothing on there right now. If you go sign up if you go follow me on Instagram, you're not going to see nothing. But pretty soon you're going to see probably over 100 pictures drop.
Well, we're gonna
content's dropping. We're gonna go over there.
We'll have to tag you, Tim, because we put you in one of our 80s videos. we did our little promo as the "Who's the Boss" intro, and you and L.A. Marzulli are sitting there in there, and Mike Heiser.
We got Mike Heiser and Dr. Judd
Mike
Burton.
Heiser shared it. So we're just
I'll
a couple.
take a look at that. I'll share it too. Honestly, I don't even know how to use Instagram. My wife is trying to show me how to use Instagram. I don't know how to use it. I hate these social media platforms, but it is the best way for people just to kind of check in. Websites are kind of old fashioned at this point. So it's just convenient for people. That's why I'm doing it. Also, I have a podcast, the Alberino Analysis. The podcast is just the audio version of the lectures. So if you want to listen to a podcast format and without pulling it up on YouTube, you can just go to the Alberino Analysis, find it in English and in Spanish, just like the YouTube videos. And also my book is out in paperback and Kindle, and I'm working on an audio version.
Dude, busy man.
Tim, thanks so much, man. Thanks for coming on our show. Can we send you a shirt?
Yeah,
by the way?
let me send you a shirt. All right.
Sure.
And Nate's going to send you that video, so you don't have to get on Instagram and find it. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Encourage people to listen to this podcast through the midpoint when the coffee kicks in for me, because I do feel like it was a little bit more confusing on my end of the equation in the beginning, and I hate when that happens. But anyway, it is what it is.
Appreciate you, man.
No, I feel like it takes a while to get rolling on any podcast. Usually like an hour, and it's when people start really getting into the good stuff.
Name of Jesus thing.
Well, let's do that. Let's do that. You got time next week, or?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's a lot of content there that I wanted to talk about the physical proof. I've been citing it, but I wanted to give some examples of the physicality of the abduction phenomenon and all of that, so that people can really start to understand why I say that it is incontrovertible, why I say that it is an established fact, the abduction phenomenon, because it's easy for me to say that, but I really want people to understand why I said that. They can get the book, but I think it would be profitable for us to do that.
Let us know your schedule, man. We have, we pretty much have all evenings, Nate and I. So we got to work.
Well, I'm available whenever right now. I've got a lot of free time right now. This is a very slow time of the year for me, July.
Okay. Nate. Let's get on the schedule. Maybe next week. I know we got the holiday coming up and everything, but yeah, maybe next week we can get back at it.
I can send you guys some copies of the book if you haven't got them.
I bought one.
Okay.
I'm going through it.
I've got one.
I'm slow.
Nate, I got one too, Tim. My dad's reading. I told you, so I need to catch it.
Tell your dad to watch the lecture series that I'm doing as sort of a companion to the book. And now I don't know, by the way, you guys can, I don't know. I don't talk. It may surprise you that I don't really talk to anybody. I'm good friends with LA. So I talk to LA a lot and Steve every now and again and Josh Peck, but I don't talk to a lot of these other guys. So I have no idea, what they think about the some of my theories, some of these ideas that I've been promulgating on your show and on other shows. So I have no idea what the reception is for this stuff. But so far, as it pertains to my book and as it pertains to the videos that I've been doing, the reception has been very, very positive, which surprises me because I thought that I was stirring up hornets' nest and I was expecting to get...
You probably are, but I think people are waking up, man. Like we've had the episodes. We've been two previous with you, Tim, and I think they've been both of them are easily in the top 5. Like, so they resonate. What you're doing is resonating for sure.
People they know something's wrong, but they don't know who to listen to.
They want you to break their brains like you broke mine earlier. So,
yeah.
Well, my brain was broken first, so I had to.
It's all good,
my brain broken. But see, everything is always anchored in the gospel, and that's, like I said, that's really, and obviously all of this pertains to the gospel at the end of the day. So that's really what excites me and why I believe this is so important, because I don't think people are ready. I don't think people have vessels ready. You know, if you put new wine in old wineskins, they burst. Yeah. So for people to be able to assimilate the information that's coming, both of all 3 of those factors those components, especially the alien stuff, they need new wineskins in terms of their paradigms. I'm using that not in the biblical sense, but in terms of a paradigm. They need new wineskins because otherwise their wineskins are going to burst, and they're not going to be able to process the things that are unfolding. They're not going to be able to process it with old paradigms.
In a similar term, they need to transform their minds too, not like in the transform your mind, like Paul would say, like with Christ, but the idea that you transform your whole thinking process and your own paradigms
or to be born again. Like, you have to be completely reborn, right? Like,
we are going to be literally reborn at the resurrection.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, I feel like when the gospel is laid out in that way, I feel like I'm lighter than air, and I feel like I'm full of hope. But when it's this very small, esoteric thing that only a few people get, I feel like, how could God do that to humanity? How could only a few people figure it out? We're all going to die. We're all going to get burned up. I don't know. It's sad. It's not hopeful.
Well, I think it's misconstruing the road is narrow, right? The road is narrow, I think, really just means that it's Jesus, and that's it. It's Christ, right? It doesn't mean that
I am the door.
A lot of people don't find it. It's there. It's maybe people don't choose it. It doesn't mean there's like a bunch of different things and you've got to zigzag through this little tiny. You got to every step's got to be measured. It's the narrow is Christ.
The narrow. Jesus said, "I am the door," and he also said, "I am the way." The period. That's the narrow. That's what he means that's what it means when it says that the way is that the road is narrow and few are they who find it. The way to life, because it's one road. It's there's only one way, and it's Christ, and that's exactly what that means. It doesn't mean that be careful. You think you're a Christian, but you're probably not, because you're not. You're not honoring God by celebrating the Sabbath. Yeah. And I always like to remind people that let's pretend that Israel never happened. Was there nobody who was able to be saved before Israel, before the Mosaic law? No, this has to do with the human race. Adam was the son of God before the fall, and when he was divorced from the family and then became at enmity with God. But reconciliation to the family of God is not through Israel. It's through the cross of Christ. Right. Israel is a vessel through which the message of the gospel was preserved and passed on. And that's why the word of God, the message of the gospel, was given to the Jews. And so it's very important. And that's the word of God was communicated through the prophets and through the scriptures, but it was all pointing to Christ. The point was Christ. The law was a schoolmaster. It was to instruct us so that we might understand that Jesus was the Messiah.
It's good to hear you say that. It's good to hear you say this because, well, it sounds like when I interviewed Heiser, he said the ultimate goal of Satan is to fraction the church into a million pieces. He's always going to attack who Christ is. He's never going to attack any other spiritual leader. It's always going to be a frontal assault on Christ. And so that's why I think that ultimately you're going to deconstruct into something else. Always.
I concur. Yeah, it's because that's the avenue of salvation. That's the way of salvation is you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. That is the confession of faith. I mean, remember that Christ, when he was in Israel or in Judea, performing miracles that the centurion approached him and said, my servant is sick at home and dying. And Jesus said, well, I'll get up and go to him. And this, what does the centurion say? No. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is say the word, and my servant will be made well. And what did Jesus say? Jesus said, he looked at the Jews around him and he said, there is not even faith like this in Israel. In other words, this guy has more faith than you do, saving faith, salvific faith than you do. And how do I know that it's salvific faith? Because what does Jesus say next to them? Well, of course, he says to them that there will be many who will be seated with Abraham at the banquet of God.
Yeah.
And that, basically paraphrasing, in that a lot of you aren't going to be there, basically talking to the Hebrews, because you who think that you have the law, here comes a centurion. He believes in me. And the centurion believed in Jesus. He believed in Jesus according to the gospel. Why? Not because he knew the law and the prophets. He was a Roman citizen, centurion. But because he saw Jesus, he saw what Jesus did, and he heard Jesus professing that he was doing these things in the name of his Father. He therefore concluded that this was the Son of God, because that's what Jesus was saying. And he believed that Jesus was the Son of God operating in the authority of his Father. And guess what? That was saving faith. And that centurion, that Gentile Roman centurion, will be sitting at the banquet table with Abraham. So what does that tell you? I mean, I'm that centurion.
Yeah, we're the Gentiles.
I'm the centurion. I don't need to become like the Israelites. You know why? Because I'm Adam.
Yep.
And the gospel of Christ is the redemption, the reconciliation, and the restoration of Adam. And I'm Adam. I qualify because I'm an offspring of Adam, not because I'm the vine that you're grafted into is Christ. It's Jesus. I am the vine. You are the branches. It's not Israel. It's Jesus is the vine. And these guys, they misconstrue the gospel by thinking that Israel's the vine. Well, if Israel's the vine, then there was no salvation for Adam and his offspring until Abraham.
Right.
And then the Jews rest their laurels on being descendants of Abraham as the key to their salvation. And
Jesus said, I can raise up the offspring of Abraham from these rocks. So it's not about, I mean, Israel's important, very important in the story of the gospel. I'm not belittling the importance of understanding Israel and understanding the gospel as it pertains to the Old Testament and the Messiah. Jesus said all of these, the prophets, the prophets, the law, the prophets, and all of the sayings and the Psalms, all of these speak of me, he said. All of them speak of me. And remember the transfiguration. The transfiguration, you had the apostles up there, Peter, John, and James up there with Jesus on Mount Hermon, by the way. And Jesus transfigures before them. And who appears?
Elijah.
Moses and Elijah. Guess what that represents? The law and the prophets. And then the disciples want to make them tabernacles, right? Let's make tabernacles. But then suddenly what happens? The audible voice of God booms, thunders above them. And what does he say? This is my beloved Son. Hear him.
Yeah.
In other words, Jesus is the conclusion of the law and the prophets of Moses and Elijah. It's Jesus. It's not Moses. It's not Elijah. It's Jesus. You know what the commandment of God is? And Jesus says this. This is the commandment of God, that you believe in his Son. That's the commandment of God. Because the law and the prophets, Moses and Elijah, were speaking, pointing to Jesus. So this is God's commandment. This is my beloved Son. Hear him. That's the law I follow. The law of the Father is to believe in the Son. The commandment of the Son is to love one another and love the Father. That is the law.
Yeah, and I would say one of the most The thief on the cross is one of my favorite stories in the New Testament because it showcases that. Like, he doesn't deserve any of this. And in his dying breath, he recognizes this is Jesus. He didn't do anything wrong. And he says, "You will be with me in paradise." He didn't do anything.
But don't forget about the centurion, a different centurion, standing there watching this unfold. And what did he say? "Surely this is the Son of God." And guess what? That is saving faith. That's saving faith. And anybody who says that that's not saving faith is putting an obstacle in front of people who would believe on the Son of God. And let me tell you something. Yeah. You do not put obstacles in the way of children who are coming to the Lord. You don't. And when I say children, I mean us, anybody who are coming to the Lord, who are coming eager to receive the gospel.
Yeah.
You do not put hurdles in their way to come to Christ.
Yeah, my 7-year-old's asking me all those kinds of questions right now, especially about the dinosaurs and stuff. And I'm just, you know what I mean? I'm trying to get him to understand the gospel the way a 7-year-old can, but I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, well, there's a lot of fake lies out there. And he goes, "You mean people are telling you a bad truth?" And I said, "Yep, there's a lot of bad truths out there." And he's coming around to it, but it's like,
I'm going to do it. It's down the line here, down the road. I'm going to do a lecture on the gospel. What is the gospel? And I have this way of explaining the gospel that I do with my kids. I have 5 boys, and it's amazing how when you push all of the noise out of the way and you make it about our problem that we have, which is in the prodigal son, that we're divorced from the family of God and we need to get back into the family. That's what Jesus did. That's what Jesus does. In my Father's house are many rooms, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. If I go to prepare a place for you, I will come and get you so that you may be with me where I am. Where is he going? Where is he taking us? To the Father's house. It's the parable of the prodigal son. So it's about bringing us back into the family. Adam was a son of God. We're going to become sons of God through the resurrection, through Christ. And so that's the gospel. And everything in between, the Old Testament, all of the stories and all, that's all just filler. That's all just extra stuff. That's additional stuff. But the gospel of Christ is the return of mankind to the family of God through the Son of God. And so there's aspects of the gospel that once they're understood in the proper context, it's like even my 5-year-old gets it, which is understanding redemption and then reconciliation and then restoration, because those are 3 different things and they all happen in sequence through Christ. And you understand that you have to be redeemed because we're indentured to the swineherd in the parable of the prodigal son. We're indentured to the swineherd. We're born in a state of enmity with God. So we need to be redeemed, bought back. Yeah. Our debt needs to be paid in order to legally get us back from the swineherd, from Satan. And so that debt is paid. That's redemption at the cross. And then we need to be reconciled to God. We need to be this enmity that we have with God. We need peace. We need peace between us and God, which is the cross. That's also the work of the cross. Now we can be reconciled, brought back into the family so that we might be restored to everything that was lost in Adam. And that is just it's the greatest story ever told. And so it just fascinates, it fascinates the mind of children, the mind of adults. It's fascinating. Anyway, I could just keep going forever. I don't want to have you guys in.
No, we'll have you back on. We appreciate it.
So, hey, it was a pleasure, guys. I always apologize for sucking all the air out of the room, but I've just got so much that I want to convey to people that it's hard for me to not be a motor mouth. So I always apologize for that.
No, man, that's what you're there for.
Yeah, that's what we're here for too. Yeah.
We can't talk for 3 hours, so we're happy that you do it.
Can I ask you guys how old are you guys?
I just turned 40.
I'm 39.
Okay, I'm 38, so I figured we were about the same age.
Yeah.
Well, your show's very good. It's very interesting, and I commend you guys for what you do and appreciate it. And listen, you want to schedule me, let's say, I think I've got some family coming in, let's just say between the 15th and like the 25th.
Stabile,
How you doing?
Frankie Carbone, and then there was Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy, and his guys, Frankie the Wop, Freddie No Nose, and then there was Pete the Killer, who was Sally Balls' brother. And you had Nicky Eyes.
What's up, guy?
And Mikey Francesi.
That guy, yeah, I want to see him.
And Jimmy Two Times, who got that nickname because he said everything twice, like...
I'm gonna go get the papers, get the papers.
Come on, lift it up. Vinny, they're gonna be out of style by the time you get this thing going. Come on, lift it up. There you go.
What?
Just, you know, you're funny.
You mean,
So?
well, let me understand this, because maybe it's me, I'm a little up, maybe. But I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you. I make you laugh. I'm here to fucking amuse you. What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
No, just, you know how you tell a story. What?
No, I don't know. You said it. How do I know? You said I'm funny. How the fuck am I funny? What the fuck is so funny about me? Tell me. Tell me what's funny.
Get the fuck out of here, Tommy.
Yeah, I almost had him. Stuttering prick, yeah. Frankie, was he shaking? I wonder about you sometimes, Henry. You may fold under question.
Yourself, Tommy.
That's fucking right. I don't believe what I just heard.
Hey, Spider, here. Here, this is for you. Atta boy. I got respect for this. He's got a lot of fucking balls. This kid. Good for you. Don't take no shit off nobody. He shoots him in the foot. He tells him to go fuck himself. Tom, you gonna let him get away with that? You gonna let this fucking punk get away with that? What's the matter? What's the world coming to?
What the fucking world is coming to? How do you like that? How's that?